And we'll start with priority, Carol. I think it's Commissioner Rostein's turn to start.
Okay. Just a couple things. One, a belated happy birthday to my mom, who turned 92 yesterday, so I'm pretty excited about that. And she's still got the Jersey vigor in her, so
Happy birthday to her.
that's right. Although she doesn't listen to this stuff. But anyway, lots going on this past week. We had our commissioners' reception, which was very enjoyable, having the community out there. Congressman Ruppersberger, I won't say just showed up, but you'd think somebody like that would just have a cameo, and he didn't. He stayed the entire evening, and there's, I think, another shot, Chris, that's more appropriate than that one. And we...
Who's the people with him?
Yeah, and this was, honestly, this was like at the very end of the evening. He stayed the entire evening, and regardless of political views, all that, I mean, he's been a congressman for 21 years. He has been a mentor of mine for many, many years. When I ran the installation, he represented Fort Meade. But beyond him, the real VIPs that were there were the community, the business owners, the Main Street, the developers, the local municipalities and their leadership. It was a great time. Salerno's did awesome, and really, really appreciate everything economic development did in the pre-planning of this event, the planning and the execution. It was flawless. Commissioner Kyler and I went down to Mako. That was, enjoyable. We had, and I'm just going to share, but I'd like the others to talk more about it. The breakfast for Boys and Girls Club, we just represent our state so well, and people don't realize how well Carroll County does it, until you get down there and people are like, Carroll County's in the house. And it's pretty special, from the leadership and administration down in Annapolis, showing their appreciation that we are there as leaders representing the community, because you don't get that across the state. And so we're doing it well. I am looking forward to having a conversation with Mr. Fowler in a few minutes regarding some of the legislative issues that are coming out of Annapolis. And again, the purpose of Commissioner Kyler, and this is where I'll stop, purpose of Commissioner Kyler and I being down there every Wednesday is to remind Annapolis through a public forum that we want local control, and we deserve local control, and the counties across Maryland, the 24 jurisdictions, are better served through local control. And we're going to talk about that on one specific issue, I know. So that's just a reminder. So for anyone who has question and about any legislation, feel free to reach out to myself or any of our colleagues, and we'll go from there. That's all I have for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Vigliotti.
Thank you, Commissioner Kyler. Good morning, everybody. So with the snowstorm late last week, most of my commitments were postponed or canceled, and so Commissioner Kyler can certainly take heart that I will be expeditiously concise and not multiloquent this morning.
Oh, my gosh.
How's that for you, Jersey?
Can you write that down and give it to me later?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think you used every letter of the alphabet.
You got to get them all. You got to get them all. So I will echo everything that Commissioner Rothstein said about our reception the other evening. It was phenomenal to have Congressman Ruppersberger there and to see the turnout among all the different members of our community, because at the end of the day, we really do serve the same community, and it's all about building strong relationships so that we can work together to serve that same community. Yesterday, the only other thing I have to talk about today is that I attended the meeting for the Commission on Aging and Disabilities. And these are absolutely wonderful people who are dedicated to serving the elderly and the disabled. And among other things, they're getting ready for the Veterans Celebration on May 5th. And they are looking for volunteers to help run that day. So if you are willing or able to volunteer that day, we could certainly use you. Additionally, there are still 2 openings on the commission for representatives from Manchester and Finksburg. So if you would like to be a part of the Commission on Aging and Disabilities or know someone who would, the application can be found on the county's website. And that is all for me this morning, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Gordon.
Thank you. Well, first off, I'll just follow up to Commissioner Vigliotti, and for those kind of wondering what his definition was, that word means talkative for those of us at 9 o'clock in the morning trying to keep up with Commissioner Vigliotti. As already has been mentioned, the reception the other evening was very well attended. I thought it was a great mix of the community as a whole, business leaders, other elected officials. I just thought it was a great opportunity for us to all get together and, one, have a little bit of time after the holiday season to interact and kind of, we've come down from that, but we have the opportunity to, talk and share things and just interact and see if there's opportunities that we can, better work together. And I thought that was a very well organized event by Economic Development and staff and everybody what was involved. Yesterday, I was in Annapolis yesterday morning with Commissioner Kyler and Commissioner Rothstein at the annual Boys and Girls Club breakfast. I thought that was incredibly well attended. It was great to see the Lieutenant Governor, as always. We have Delegate Tomlinson that decided to join us for part of that. It was great to have not only our local Boys and Girls Club, but we here in Carroll County are very fortunate, and I think we've done this at least 2 years in a row now, amazingly. Our Carroll County Youth of the Year has also ended up winning the Maryland Youth of the Year. This year it's Jalen Lemon, and Jalen has done a fantastic job promoting Boys and Girls Club and interacting statewide on their behalf. And we also had Amari Alazer, who is the Maryland Military Youth of the Year. So the two of them have interacted both statewide, locally, as well as nationally on a number of things. And it's been everything from interactions on television and just, doing what we, would love to see our young generations doing. And sometimes we do have those rare occasions in the news where you hear negativity about kids, but these kids are great. I mean, and I can say that about Jalen. I know her personally, but I can tell you that about a lot of these kids. Some of these kids come from very traditional families in Carroll County for our local Boys and Girls Club. Some of the kids are homeless. Some have a lot of other intriguing and very unfortunate challenges, but the thing is they rise above them. That club is, we all heard yesterday, is a safe space. Mm-hmm. It's a place that they can go, and whether there's concerns at home, they're having issues at school, they can go in there, they spend time on their education, they interact with other kids, and the fascinating thing, and I think it's definitely nationally, but definitely with our Boys and Girls Club, is the kids are empathetic to each other. So whether it's a child that comes from a traditional family or a child that has other challenges at home, they're looking out for each other. And that's something I think that's a great model that we all should benefit from. But I do want to just mention this really quickly, and then that's all I have this morning. Our local Boys and Girls Club in Westminster, which is on Main Street, that was a $5.5 million project that the community got together, and of course now they're opening at Pantherplex shortly in Hampstead. But that project is one that got national attention from all the other Boys and Girls Clubs as to how can we emulate this project, and it's a perfect testament to who we are as Carroll County, be it the Boys and Girls Club, be it a variety of our other organizations. We do things very well, and we're happy to share those for other people to benefit. So that's all I have this morning.
If I can,
Yes.
let me just add real quick. Chris, put that picture back up just for one more second, because first off, the Lieutenant Governor, she took a beeline over to us
Yes.
because she recognizes Carroll County, and she is very genuine in her approach that I've witnessed and been a part of since she's taken office. And we talked about Jalen, because Jalen, when she spoke, she said that she is blessed to have this position of being recognized, to have the platform to talk about behavioral health. And that is her focused area. And I appreciate that, because I'm very much focused on behavioral health and mental health issues. And I talked to the Lieutenant Governor. I said, we need to be mentored by the folks that are closest to the problems. And Jalen, like Commissioner Gordon shares, is close to the problems. Empathetic space, open space in the Boys and Girls Club, and that's where you're going to get your solutions. So it was a it was a wonderful dialogue that I'm going to remember and use as a catalyst to figure out how to do things better. Really impressed by that young lady, Jalen, using that as because that's takes courage and bravery. So we do it right. So I just want to add that too. But thanks.
No, absolutely. And just to kind of follow up really quickly, you're absolutely right. I think it was amazing that that's her platform, and it's definitely something that's a huge, I hate to use the word huge, but large challenge in our community, and it's something we all have to face and recognize and work together on. But
Yeah.
another topic that came up Tuesday evening, and a lot of us have talked about it in here already, when we were at the reception, was the shortage of nurses we have.
Yeah.
And Jalen's going to school right now to be a neonatal nurse, so I thought that was incredible. So, hats off to her, just absolutely wonderful example of, young people we have in our community. We couldn't ask for more, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Garing.
Thank you. Good morning, Carroll County. A lot of what I was going to mention has been discussed. I do have to say about the Boys and Girls Club, I didn't really know much about it before I became a commissioner, and I can thank Commissioner Gordon for exposing me to the club in Westminster. And truly an amazing group, Sean Davis and his staff. And now they've expanded down to Mount Airy as well to start a program. So, and if you're in the county and you're looking for places to put your money to help people, and you want those dollars to go a long way, Boys and Girls Club is a great option for you because it's really amazing what they get done. And then I also wanted to thank Denise Beaver and her staff for the event on Tuesday night, the economic development event. It was very well attended, some really good folks, and good food as well. So I want to thank her and her staff for a job well done on that. And I say we just run it like that again next year. It seemed like it went really well. So that's all for me.
Yeah. Shout out to Salerno's.
Yes, absolutely.
Bruce did a
Yeah,
great job.
great,
was
great
very
event.
good food.
And, yeah,
So nicely done.
and staff did a good job. Okay, thank you, commissioners, and I'll be semi-brief. We've worked on more budget, and we had more snow. And we consistently say that Carroll County is complaint-driven, and we appreciate hearing from people during the snow because we might not know there's a drift at Elysia Line Burr and Chalk Road unless somebody tells us. So we appreciate the feedback. A couple people, like, they were unique. I wish they were. They're not. We had issues all over the county, and particularly when we have a little bit of wind, our roads crew can clean a road, and in 2 or 3 hours, it'll be just like it was before unless the wind and the dryness of the snow conditions change. So I appreciate the community input, and I appreciate what our crews have been doing out there. The commissioner's reception we've mentioned, and that was awesome. And I predict that if we do it in the same location next year, we'll be out in the hallway because I think it was a good crowd. The room was full, and it was a great night. And thanks to everybody that put it together, and everybody from both the elected officials and businesses who came and talked with us. It was a great evening, and I apologize. None of us, I think, got the opportunity to talk to everybody we wanted to, but we tried to get around the room as best we could, and it was great to see that all 5 of us there and engaged in, I'm not saying this is great, but we really didn't have the opportunity to talk with each other. We were all talking with others. So, and that's what those events are for. So, great. Boys and Girls Club Legislative Breakfast we've mentioned and covered, and yes, it was great. The day in Annapolis yesterday, we got to spend time with Lieutenant Governor Miller and Governor Moore, and it was exciting. I like to say sometime in these meetings, I love Carroll County. I'm almost getting both of them to say that. They both mentioned Carroll County. They both talked, and I told them I really enjoy when you say Carroll County. I don't have to, you know. I think when she came over, she said, I saw Carroll County over here and I wanted to get to you guys first. So that's great. And for whatever reason, we're getting the recognition and we're getting the ears of people in Annapolis. That's great. We mentioned Congressman Dutch Ruppensberger, and yes, he was there pretty early and stayed pretty late, and again, that's awesome. We got to talk with Secretary Kevin Addix and Secretary Anthony Woods a little bit yesterday, and again, and they don't seem to shun us yet, but our conversations were all about Carroll County and issues there. I'll get some emails out, but Secretary Addix did say some of this spreading of waste on fields he's working on. He wants an email from me on the details of our county issue. Caroline County had a town hall earlier this week with 200 people complaining about it. Wycomico County has done a local law about it. So it's a lot going on about it, and we're working on, and I know all of us talk to a lot of people and hopefully try to do some positive stuff. I don't know if we ever do it quickly enough, but we're working on it. Mako staff, and one of the opportunities with that is you see every jurisdiction represented, every county or city represented, and it's nice, and we all have an equal vote. It's the larger counties have the same say we have. So it's great, and we got to talk to a lot of other counties, other jurisdictions, and like I say, we have similar problems and we have different problems. I want to thank David Smith and Armstrong Williams for buying the Baltimore Sun and therefore the Carroll County Times. And they've talked about making both papers and the other ones better, and I hope they can. I want to mention, we want to work with all the media partners, and we don't always get as much opportunity as we'd like. Many of you know that we lost Senator Larry Haynes recently. The Baltimore Sun, Jacques there, wanted to do an obituary. He reached out to dozens of people. He asked me, he said, do you have a secret number for so-and-so and so-and-so? And I said, yes, I do, but you described it correctly. I can get them to call you, and if they want to, they will. But he didn't look at the internet. He didn't watch our meeting and say, oh, I know all the facts. He reached out and verified facts, and he did what I think a newspaper needs to do. And I think David Smith and Armstrong Williams, I think that's their intention of what they're going to get to, and I hope they can. I'm briefly going to talk about social media. Normally, Commissioner Rothstein rants about it, but today I will. I was at an event earlier this week that you had to pay to go to, so I don't know if you call that public-private. Anybody could have paid. And evidently and intentionally, I used the word shit. Well, that seems to offend a whole bunch of people. Now, I think part of the reason it offends them because I said that a group doesn't give a shit. They just say they do. And that probably offended them. They'll probably get over it. But I didn't put it on YouTube. I didn't put it on social media, but others did, and they've watched it. And I'm glad. I hope they think I made a point. But they keep saying, which people know how immature and blunt I am, and I use bad language occasionally. And I do. And yeah, I say things that I'd probably, which again, you're not allowed to do anymore, I'd probably swat the butt of a grandkid if they said it. But that's life. To those same social media people, they're trying to give me advice, and I don't normally take much advice from keyboard jockeys. I particularly don't take it from the ones who don't have the guts to use their own name. They use a fake name, they use anonymous, or they use a name that stands for what they're against. I think that's so sad. And And I'd like to tell them mainly, and anybody else listening, I'd like to use some real curse words just to show you how irrelevant shit is. Put your mind back at the last presidential election and think about everything that was going on there, and then put your mind to today, a few years later. If I wanted to use curse words, I would like to say open border, illegal crossings, gas price, grocery price. I learned something in math class, the gambler's rule, and essentially it says the one with the most money is going to win. You know, sooner or later the house is going to win. Sooner, if I sit down with Commissioner Vigliotti and he has $1 million and I have 100,000, sooner or later he's going to win. Well,
Sooner or later.
yeah, sooner or later. And you know, we look at these conflicts throughout the world, Ukraine and others, and we constantly ship our tax dollars there instead of helping people in our country. We're not going to change the fact that the one that started out with the most assets is probably going to win, and that's my humble opinion. So, you know, conflicts throughout the world. There's a lot of things that have gone on in the last few years that hadn't for the four before that. I don't care. Well, I care, but it's irrelevant who's president and who isn't, and all that. But it's very relevant every time I fill my Tahoe with gas. That has costed me almost double what it did 3 years ago. So, thank you, social media, for motivating me. And I don't look at it a lot, but I get sent text messages with links. So I'll continue to look at some of the links. But again, if you'd like to come here and do public comment, unfortunately, you have to give your name and address. You can't do it with a fake name. So bring it on. Thank you, guys.
You do give a shit.
Did I rant enough? Yeah.
You're good.
That was multiloquent.
Hey, I got you to say it.
Oh, I say it
that.
a lot.
I like that. Okay. Sorry, folks. And I just said earlier that we want to get along in Annapolis by proving we're not nuts. Well, I guess one of us can be nuts as long as you four aren't, right?
Everybody else anchors you down.
Okay, item 1, legislative update. And as Mr. Mike Fowler comes forward, he gets us around Annapolis, and we seem to be successful there, and a lot of it's him, a lot of it's Commissioner Rothstein. I have a network of people, but probably not as large as either one of them, and we're getting around seeing a lot of people. And one of the points he has made is when we're down there going around and seeing people, Annapolis sees that the Carroll County Commissioners care. We're not just sending him down there and throwing money at him. We're caring, and it's a big deal. And Commissioner Rothstein said this earlier, but if anybody has thoughts about bills, thoughts about things they want considered, we'll bring them to MACO. They don't take on everything, but they take on a lot. And if not, we'll meet with delegates and senators, and we'll bring it up. So, thank you, and
Good morning, Mike.
Good
Yes,
morning.
good morning.
90% of life is showing up, and when you show up, good things happen, right? So, yes, you are getting recognized. Yeah, so let's just kick this thing off. I think the bills, I think it's relatively slow with the bills. I kind of think that the word is out that the budget issues are so preeminent. Don't bring any bills in with large or significant fiscal notes. That seems to be something they like to do, is bring in big fiscal notes. So I think that might be contributing to it. But there are some really big issues this year, and I think that's where the focus is going to lie. I want to skip over some of these big issues, jump into a couple of bills really quickly. So that's page 3 there and what I've given you. The first is another workers' compensation occupational disease presumption. This one is long COVID, pretty problematic. It It identifies essential workers who initially contracted COVID during that particular period of March 5th, 2020 to July of 2021. And then if they subsequently were diagnosed with long COVID, they would qualify for workers' compensation. But it's very problematic from a practical standpoint. Is there a diagnosis of long COVID? The initial diagnosis would have to be documented. So this is problematic. It just is, each session we see another presumption added to the list. So for those purposes, the counties have agreed to oppose this one. Another one we talked about was the seatbelts in school buses. A lot of discussion about that, whether it actually is safe. There's an issue of capacity. So if these buses do double duty, so they do elementary, middle, and high school. So do you do 2 seatbelts? Do you do 3 seatbelts? That's a really practical matter. That MACo is going to just straight out oppose this rather than trying to amend it. It's just too sticky and too many moving parts. So we're going to oppose that outright. The understanding is MABE, Association of Boards of Education, will come out strongly against this one as well. The one that I think you referred to earlier, Commissioner Rothstein, is the Senate Bill 386 and House Bill 456, the Board of Education student member voting rights. So this would be a mandate that would grant voting rights to student members of boards of education in all counties. It does not limit them from voting on the budget. They cannot vote on dismissal or discipline of teachers and administrators. They can't vote on compensation for county staff, for board staff, but they would have a vote on the budget. And that is a real sticking point for a lot of jurisdictions. As the law currently stands, counties do have the authorization to allow that. There are counties that do allow their student member to vote on these issues. So collectively, the counties have agreed to oppose this one. This goes back to your point of local authority and
Yep.
There are a number of election bills coming in this year. This one is problematic. Senate Bill 417 and House Bill 459. That would require the state director to do a performance evaluation of each local director on an annual basis. It also requires the counties to establish and maintain a warehouse. I don't believe we have a warehouse. I know there are some counties that would be a real problem for. So we are opposing that collectively as well.
So Mike, I'm sorry, so they would require us to have a local director that would be overseen by the state who would manage the warehouse that we would have to.
So the performance evaluation of the local director would be done on an annual basis by the state director.
Okay.
The local director would be required to oversee a warehouse. So you have to establish a warehouse before you can oversee one.
So it's like establishing a whole new extra set of framework for what already exists.
Exactly.
Well, I assume this whole warehouse idea is to store the
It is.
election voting machines or
Yeah.
things.
Right.
So that actually would not be a problem for we do.
Yeah, we're able to do it,
Yeah.
but again, it goes back to the state telling the county, you will do, as opposed to the county figuring out how to do it best.
Local
And
control.
that's the real issue about this. So
Yes.
we have no issue with it because we're building a warehouse, to meet the demands, but the other jurisdictions have issues, so yeah, it's kind of staying in that same vein, same line of thing.
Right.
So,
And another bill that's come back to us is the monitoring cameras in school buses. And you may remember from last session that The attempt is to require a warning for the first incident. That's problematic for a lot of reasons. There are also other aspects of the bus cameras that come into play, and I think, Commissioner Carroll, you mentioned that yesterday, the security aspect of that, where we can see what's happening on a bus if there's an incident. It's very helpful to that.
And these cameras were developed with Carroll County Public School working in cooperation with the sheriff, and he very much values them. And again, we don't need to get into, you shouldn't pass a stop school bus, why would you get a warning, you know?
It's brought forward by a Montgomery County delegate who was a vice chair last year and who is now the majority leader. So it carries a little bit more juice, if you will, in that way. But there's a lot of opposition. I think the sheriff's associations are opposed to it as well. So we won't be alone out there arguing against that.
We just got a ticket from Montgomery County the other day in the mail from a camera. I didn't get a warning.
No,
You didn't?
speed
No,
camera.
for speeding,
Yeah, it was we.
35 in a 25 zone.
Who's we? You have a mouse in your pocket?
So will we see you in Annapolis supporting the bill?
I think passing a school bus is much worse than 35 and a 25.
Yes.
Police recruitment, along with fire and EMS, has been another issue. So Senator West has a bill and to create a work group to look into that and analyze that. I'm going to support that as well. And the last two bills, House Bill 263 and House Bill 389, interesting, they take the same approach. I don't know why these delegates didn't get together and come up with one bill, but essentially, it puts the onus on State Highway Administration to maintain sidewalks and bicycle pathways along state roads that are in your jurisdiction. Probably doesn't have a lot of optimism on passing, particularly in this fiscal situation, but we did vote to support that.
But that's interesting, though, because often we get unfunded or partially funded mandates from the state and from the federal government, but it's rare that we find something like this where we say, well, if you're going to force us to do something, you'd better pay for it. That's interesting to me.
It is a turn to have someone in the General Assembly advocating like that. That's not from our jurisdiction, from Carroll. So back to the major issues. Obviously, the budget has been released. You've probably read a lot about it. Long-term structural deficits to look forward to, $502 million in FY25, which its budget deals with, all the way to $3.4 billion in FY29. A lot of that is blueprint money. This particular budget challenges, now, let me back up. Also, no taxes in this. There will be fees that will be raised, but no taxes, which is interesting because in the political calendar, typically second year, if there's going to be a tax increase, that's typically when you'd see it. We're not going to see that. But this particular budget is a challenge specifically for the community colleges. Their funding is being reduced. The CADE formula, it was used to calculate what the community colleges receive. Roughly a third state, a third county, a third tuition. That's kind of the rough estimate. The CADE's original intent was to get the state's funding to 29%. They only recently got to that, and now it's going to be rebased and recalculated. So that's going to be a problem. I can't tell you exactly how much. We'll be seeing some of those numbers produced shortly, but it will impact all of them. I think we heard Allegheny has an incredible, 25% reduction in there. So it's going to be significant. We know about the transportation issue, the stopgap of $150 million to stabilize highway user revenue and transit, but highway user revenues are going to revert back to the levels they were prior to this last increase that we got 2 or 3 sessions ago. You'll remember back in 2008, the Great Recession, they clawed back almost all that highway user revenue, and each session, MACO on behalf of the counties have been trying, and MML on behalf of the municipalities have been trying to claw that back. Finally got a good piece of that back. Now we're going to probably lose that again. And as you know, one of the governor's main thrusts is housing. This is a statewide issue. It's a national issue. He is getting national attention, and he has proposed a housing package of 3 bills. This one that we're going to talk about, and also financing and renters' rights. 2 of those don't have really an impact on us, but the housing does. Now, the one thing I will say is that this is pretty much targeted to the urban, suburban counties, highly suburban. So think of the Montgomery, the Prince George's, Anne Arundel, Baltimore County, Baltimore City. So Senate Bill 484 is the bill that deals with zoning and zoning density and permitting. So I will say that the staff here has been really involved in the discussions. The MACO staff has been leading a discussion on this because they knew these bills were coming. So they've been leading a discussion with the locals to try to get a good understanding of how this impacts everybody at the local. So I want you to know that your folks have been deeply involved in those discussions.
And I think that's a good point, and we talked a little bit about MACO, but yes, they're very involved with talking to staff about issues. They have people who investigate each bill, but they're not shy about reaching out to our county and getting input from staff here, and that's important too.
Yes, and on these large issues, they really know what the General Assembly is thinking, what's coming, and they're actually in touch with the legislators that are going to put forward these issues, and they negotiate. So, but they couldn't do that without the input from the local governments, staff of local governments. I gave you a list of slides that the Department of Housing and Community Development provided to the MACO Legislative Committee, so probably good reading for insomnia, but just so you have the details on that. So one of the big aspects of this has to do with development within 1 mile of a rail station. You're out of that picture completely. The one that does have an impact or potential impact on you is an historic state-owned campus that's at least 50 years old, so Warfield. We already mentioned Warfield. What that would mean is that a project could get a 30% density bonus if they have at least 50% affordable housing units on the site. Now, where that affects you is there is also a adequate public facilities exemption that is limited and focused. It's if a project is receiving either low-income tax credits from the state or state financing in some way, then that density bonus would apply. We're told the state funds 30 to 40 projects annually across the state, so it's relatively limited. There's probably not going to be an increase in that funding because of the budgetary pressures. So a lot of things have to happen before that can be. Now, the other thing, too, is if it's a reasonable concern, a reasonable public facilities issue, then this won't necessarily be exempted. So that's another sort of safety valve for you. And the other aspect is manufactured homes. So this would preempt restrictions on manufactured homes in areas that are zoned for single-family residences. Now, the issue of manufactured homes, they are HUD approved, not necessarily locally approved. So the MACO will offer an amendment to refer to them as modular homes, which are approved at the local level. And of course, they would have to be fixed to a foundation. So we're not talking about trailer parks, we're talking about foundation, permanent homes. So that's pretty much the housing package.
Just add a couple things, clarification. One is, there's a 15-year sunset provision on this housing legislation.
Good point.
There was a lot of conversation about, should we support this with amendments and add amendments to this? Should we oppose this because for us, there's concerns? The conversations that were occurring was that this is kind of like the less of all evils. This is the least intrusive across the state that the governor is proposing. Because, you know, a couple of the jurisdictions are like, why is this a signature? You know, bill, I mean, it's not a lot of meat in this. And because Maryland is seen as not doing enough when it comes to affordable housing and opportunities for lower income. So, you know, I say it about us here in Carroll County. I don't want anybody to write our own, I want us to write the story for Carroll County. And I think that's what the governor is trying to attempt, is write the story for Maryland to say, this is what we're doing. The impact it does have on us, Warfield, we are challenged with that. So MACO is putting in a couple of amendments. So the support with amendments, one of them is if a project is determined to meet adequate public facility requirements, the local jurisdiction shall have 2 years to try add capacity to necessary public facilities.
Right.
And then the second, which I like using other people's money, is in instances where a project qualifies for exemption under 7 TAC 105, the state shall provide adequate additional funding to increase the capacity of the necessary public facilities. Now, whether those two amendments actually pass or not, they're putting their best foot forward to protect us. And again, that was a conversation we had, I think it was Dom on the Rural Coalition, because I was very concerned. So they added these two amendments to help, you know, the challenge that we may have or may face when this passes, so.
And frankly, as you know,
Yep.
they're unlikely to pass as proposed, but it still makes a statement that the counties have a big concern if you're going to exempt, you know, if you're going to discard basically concerns about adequate facilities,
Right.
that you really need to put some money in this, so.
So
But
I just
we'll
wanted to
see.
throw those points out there because, again, our voice matters. And
Yes, and you know, as you say, it's a big issue. He needs to be seen as taking steps to try to alleviate this problem. There are advocates that are saying it's not going far enough. But one of the upfront, to your point, one of the upfront points that they made was that they want to respect local authority
Yep.
to the extent possible in this. So I think we can all appreciate that. And the only other thing I'll say, I've talked about sort of an omnibus solar bill coming forward. It looks like that's not going to happen. There may be something that tries to set up the framework about the state standards for facilities above 2 megawatts, but nothing large and intrusive. And to a point that I think you had a question last session about community solar and capacity, and I think I answered you incorrectly. So community solar has been increased. The megawatt capacity on solar was increased from 2 megawatts to 5 megawatts. But community solar is a subscriber model. So that's really what differentiates community solar. It's not the capacity, it's the model, the subscriber model. You still have authority for below 2 megawatts. Above 2 megawatts, the state has the authority on that. So I just need to make that one clear. No mea culpa. That's really all I have.
Any questions, comments?
Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Always.
See you next week. Okay, item 2, approval to purchase Cisco SmartNet support renewal. Do we have anybody from Department of Technology? All right.
Got to put out the
they're
smart
coming.
one to
Hi,
catch
guys.
them.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, everybody.
The Office of Procurement, in cooperation with the Department of Technology Service, requests your approval to award the purchase for Cisco SmartNet support services to E-Plus Technology, Inc. in the amount of $148,066.82. This purchasing has been made through the Maryland State Hardware 2012 Master Contract Number 060B2490022, which was competitively bid. This cost has been approved in the fiscal year '24 budget.
So this is one of those easy ones, fortunately. Basically, what we have is a bunch of routers and switches in all the various buildings around the county, creating our network. This is 24/7 support on those routers and switches. If there are any issues with them, be software upgrades, we can get replacements if we need to have them. So it just is what we've been, and we've been doing this now for 15, 20 years. We've had the Cisco SmartNet.
Motion to award the Cisco SmartNet support renewal with licenses to E-Plus Technology Incorporated, the amount of $148,066.82.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Our next item is approval to submit application for grant. Good morning.
Yes, good morning,
Morning.
Commissioners.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning. Denise Beaver, Director of Economic Development, and I have with me Jane Sewell, who is the manager of the Carroll County Farm Museum. And we are here to ask for your approval to submit an application for the Maryland Heritage Area Authority Grant Program. And this is for a project at the Carroll County Farm Museum that Jane has become aware of and is very passionate about. And we feel that it will help to enhance the education that we provide to the community about rural farming and our rural heritage here in Carroll County, and also add to, you know, the attractiveness of the Carroll County Farm Museum to have a mill there. So I'd like Jane to talk about the opportunity, and the process will be that Friday we would submit a letter of intent to apply for this grant, and that is a non-binding letter that we would send to the Maryland Heritage Area Authority. And then that means, you know, we intend to move forward to apply for the grant, and then we would be working on that grant application. We would submit it and hopefully be awarded a $50,000 grant, which would be matched by the Farm Museum Patrons Fund for this project. So the project is about a historic mill that we would intend to move to the Carroll County Farm Museum property. So I'll let Jane talk about the specifics of
Before she
the project.
starts, can you mention, because this is a matching grant,
It is.
but you have, you're doing the match.
Yes, the Patrons Fund of the Carroll County Farm Museum has funds to be able to do the match. So that is what we intend to do. And there have been, I think everybody's done some due diligence on this project, even though it's kind of come up fairly recently in this last year. But we've had experts and construction people go out and look at the mill that is in question, and they feel that it is possible to move it and restore it, to its use and be used then as a good educational mill to be able to explain how people would be using this on their farm, in the 19th and 20th centuries, so that they can be self-sufficient, basically. And so it would be very common, and obviously many of you know the history. In Carroll, we had many mills all over Carroll County, and that's just the way it was done. So I think it would be a great educational asset to the Farm Museum. And with Jane's experience and I think passion for mills and all of that, she's feeling that it's a really good fit there. So I'm here to support her in that endeavor.
Quick question, if I might. So this is through the Maryland Heritage Area Authority grant program. And obviously Carroll County, and we mention this every year in budget, we support them financially from us. Is there anyone else in Carroll County this year that's applying for a grant in Carroll
Not
County?
that I'm aware of, yeah, and
Okay.
that's one of the other opportunities is that, since we do, fund the Heart of the Civil War Heritage Area, we're part of that. Typically, we have projects like this that would go then to apply for the grants. There's a couple grant opportunities each year. One is now, and one is for minor grants in the fall. Yeah, so we typically have projects, and so typically we get the money back. It's like a kind of an investment, and our return on the investment is usually double or triple what we invest in it. So, for Carroll County to continue to invest in our history and our heritage, that's important. But this is the only grant possibility, if you approve us to apply, that I'm aware of to date.
Okay, thank you.
And then, Jane, can you tell us why you want to take a donated mill and how you're going to run it?
She's going to put you to work in the mill.
Yeah, I'm looking for volunteers.
That's great.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here. This mill is pretty unique. It's 12 by 12 feet. It's very small. It is a two-story mill. It was built in 1906 on the property right near Union Bridge. It's owned now by Richard and Charlene Blackston. They want to preserve this mill. It's not in use at the moment and has not been for a while. The interior of it, the actual mill workings are there. The stones, the gears. It has a metal wheel, which is good because it's not a wooden wheel that would have to be totally replaced. And that wheel is under the first floor. It's really a fascinating place. The mill is on a stone foundation. The interior of it and a lot of the framing is in relatively good shape. We have had it looked at by timber frame gentleman Glenn James, who did all the work on the Huff Barn. And he went out, he's aware of the mill, he knows the family, and he looked at it and assessed it. He said it definitely can be restored. It will take work. The biggest thing that we have is to move it. That's where the bulk of the money is going to probably go. Not that we won't look for opportunities for maybe some trucking companies or whatever to help us, but we can't count on that. We're looking for the grant. My reason for wanting it, the history of the Farm Museum goes back to the almshouse. And the residents of the almshouse, back before the Civil War, we're talking back in the 1850s, it was 300 and some acres. They did all their own farming, raising the animals. They did everything themselves. So I have no documentation that tells me that they would have had a mill of this time, of this sort. However, they very well may have, and being a wooden structure and being that the Farm Museum took over in the 60s, the 1960s, perhaps that mill was torn down, if there ever was one. But the fact remains that farms had individual mills to be self-sufficient, then they would not have to travel to a mill over like McKinstry's Mill or Roop's Mill or Union Mills. And they would have had their own little mill that would have ground the corn, the grain, whatever, and they would be self-sufficient. And every resident that was able, that was a resident at the almshouse, was expected to work. That's women and men.
And Jane, I'm of the understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there aren't many of these left, right? These
They
personal
know
use
of-
mills.
There is no knowledge of any. This seems to be one of a kind that is available, possibly to us. I had personally, having been at Union Mills and involved with the SPOOM, the Society for the Preservation of Old Mills, I've never heard of one of these before. So it's obviously relatively unique. And that's why I think it would be something, because of its size and the fact that it can be restored to working order. It would not work as a water source. It would have a small generator that would actually work it. But there's enough of the mill workings that I have a very talented staff, a maintenance staff, and some of my employees, and a lot of volunteers that I know that are really kind of intrigued with this idea and see it as a real bonus to our education and to our education on farming in Carroll County, because this is something different. This isn't a commercial mill that you can go to. That it's something that I had never heard of and is not available anyplace else. I think it would be a shame for it to deteriorate, and I know that the Blackstons are, they love it and they really want it preserved. They're elderly, and they are not in a position themselves to restore it. So that's why they thought of us. So we do have a letter from them, a document from them donating this to us, just the same as the Huff Barn from Merlin Huff's family many years ago, which I will add is probably the most visited part of the Farm Museum. It's just amazing, and people love to come and see it. So I think this would be a very good educational tool. I think children would like to see it as well.
Motion to direct the Carroll County Farm Museum staff to send a Maryland Heritage Areas Authority grant program letter of intent, apply for $50,000, and if awarded, accept the grant for the relocation and restoration of the Fairs Mill at the Carroll County Farm Museum.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Now we have a briefing discussion on approval of a grant application and award acceptance Rural Legacy Program.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Please. Before we get into the next agenda item, I would like to take just a minute to introduce Ms. Daphne Daly, who is our new Deputy Director for the Department of Planning and Land Management. So Daphne is returning to the county. She had close to 10 years of experience working with the county, the last 2 years being the Bureau Chief of Comprehensive Planning. She then took a 10-year hiatus from us, working for the Archdiocese of Baltimore and also Baltimore County as a senior planner. So thrilled that she agreed to come back to us, and she has really hit the ground running. There are a lot of staff that are still here that she's worked with in the past, and just wanted to introduce her to you all, and that you will be seeing her up here for various agenda items. But didn't want to take any significant time, just wanted to introduce her, and then we will take a back seat and allow staff to run through the remainder of the agenda items that we have today.
Well, welcome
And I
back.
would, yeah, welcome
Yes, welcome.
here, and it's interesting. you have full knowledge of what you're getting into, and you came back, so thank you.
Still showed up.
Congratulations.
Very much
I'm
appreciated.
really,
And
really
welcome.
happy to be
Yes,
back. Thank you.
congratulations.
You're
Yes.
welcome back.
So, thank you.
Thank you both. Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Appreciate this time with you guys. I want to start off by saying that we are up to 79,737 acres. So that's 2 settlements since I've seen you last, and we're still looking forward to several more.
Awesome.
So today, we're before you for approval for the FY25 grant application and award acceptance for our Rural Legacy Program. The Maryland Rural Legacy Program is administered by the Department of Natural Resources and provides grants to sponsors to supplement their land preservation efforts. Carroll County has been a major recipient of these grants, totaling more than $22 million since 2000. These grants have bolstered Carroll County's preserved land by more than 5,400 acres to date within the county's 2 designated rural legacy areas, the Upper Patapsco Rural Legacy Area and the Little Pipe Creek Rural Legacy Area, which encompass nearly 100,000 acres. Each year, the county is invited to submit an application to the program for additional grant monies. Grant requests reflect demand within our current applicant pool, whose properties are within one of the county's 2 rural legacy areas.
Motion to approve the submittal of the FY25 grant application and acceptance of award to the Rural Legacy Program.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. Any more comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is the public hearing, bulk requirements in commercial zones. And we need to call to order for the public hearing, and you're going to tell us the rules.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. As you said, this is a proposed amendment to the bulk requirements for commercial zoning districts when these properties are adjacent to residential areas or residential districts. This proposed ordinance was advertised in the Carroll County Times on January 11th and January 18th of this year. With us are Mary Lane and Hannah Weber from the Department of Planning, or the Bureau of Planning, to discuss the specifics of the proposal and answer any questions you may have.
Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning.
So with that, I have a quick presentation to go over before we get into discussions. So to date, this process started back in May of 2023. You all gave us direction as staff and direction to the Planning Commission to examine the bulk requirements of the commercial districts when they are adjacent to a residential district. The Planning Commission had very long discussions on this topic and discussed them during their July, August, September, and October meetings. So currently, our bulk requirements in the commercial districts, we have a side yard requirement of 10 feet, a rear yard requirement of 15 feet, a front yard requirement of 10 feet, and a height maximum of 50 feet. Looking at our residential districts, the maximum height for the R40, R20, and R10,000, we have a height maximum of 35 feet, and then for the R75, we have a height maximum of 40 feet. That being said, we do allow currently height modifications in the residential districts. So height in a residential district can be increased by 1 foot for every half a foot of each side yard setback is increased, and this can go up to 40 feet. So here is the proposed language that was sent to public hearing. The Planning Commission also recommended these as well. So the 35 height maximum to be reduced from the 50 feet. This is the maximum starting height in the majority of the residential districts. Increasing the side yard setback from 10 feet to 15 feet. 15 feet was the setback prior to the 2019 Comprehensive Rezoning Text Amendment, and this would be consistent with the rear yard setback of 15 feet. Grandfathering existing buildings to prevent any non-conforming buildings that are currently in use. And then allowing a height modification that is similar to what is currently allowed in the residential districts. So increasing each side or rear yard setback that is adjacent to the residential district would allow for a 1-foot height increase. This would be up to 50 feet. And then to obtain the maximum height of 50 feet in building height, the side and rear yard setback adjacent to the residential district would have to be at least 30 feet. And this was proposed to allow for more design flexibility. So that was just my very quick presentation, if you have any questions.
And you spoke very slowly. I appreciate that.
Thank you, I tried.
Commissioners, do you have, before we open up public comment, do you have any questions, concerns, or you want to wait till after public comment?
Yeah.
Just how many, you said there's exemptions that are made for residential. I mean, has it been used where residential properties have increased above 35 feet?
I'm not sure.
We could look into that. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
That isn't
I
something we
don't-
looked into.
I don't know, I'm curious. I mean, 35 feet's pretty tall, I mean, just by itself. I would just be curious, because it was something I wasn't even thinking through, the residential, but, okay. I don't think it's gonna have any impact on the thoughts, but just a question, okay. No, I think that's all I want to hear, and then if there's any public comments, we'll go from there.
Anybody else? Chris, do we have somebody on the phone for this topic?
Yes, sir. I have 2 callers. We'll start with Cynthia Lowe in just a moment, and I have a second caller. We'll call on you as soon as she's finished. You'll have 3 minutes to make public comment. We will tell you when those 3 minutes is up. Okay, Cynthia, to unmute your phone, please use *6.
Good morning, how are you?
Good morning.
So, thank you for the meeting, thank you for taking my call. I have a couple of concerns. First, I've heard several times is that no one cares about these meetings, and nobody cares, the public don't care. But these meetings on important matters such as this are held during the day. Most people are working. It's very difficult for people to come to these meetings. Things that are this important, it would be wonderful if you could do these meetings in the evening. And I think you would have much, much more participation because people are concerned and people do care. And I'm sorry that I'm not there personally. I've had other things to deal with today, and it's hard for me to keep track of all the rules and regulations and changes and meetings and things that you guys have for things. I want to bring up the point that you guys are elected by us, the voters. You work for us, not for the developers. But in the 6 years that I've been here, I see constant changes for the developers. Let's build, let's build, let's build, to the detriment of the people that actually live here. And I know that there's a group of people that are above you or behind you, that when you guys make decisions, sometimes when they're, the people that get those decisions don't like them, they appeal them, they go to other people. These people are not accountable to the voters. I think that process is broken. I'd like to see something done about it. I don't know how to change it, but I'd love a discussion about it. People live in Carroll County because it's not like everywhere else. When I bought my house 6 years ago, I did it because I wanted to live in a rural area. However, since I've gotten here, all I've seen in this area is build, 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 build. I don't think it's a good idea to build a shopping center or a commercial district next to somebody's house, have their backyard that their kids play in, back up to now a shopping center or a parking lot. Most of the people that live here, we didn't move here for those reasons. Second story, big buildings, now you've got people overlooking their house, looking into their house, looking over their yard. Again, that's not why we moved here. I do appreciate that you guys are considering reverting back the original 15 feet. That's great news. But, as the Commissioner just said, 35 feet, it's huge. That's a tall building. And we're gonna put that next to somebody's house? And then you're considering maybe letting them make it up to 50 feet? Come on. We as residents of this county deserve to enjoy our homes.
Please
and our
finish your
property
thoughts, please.
and not have to deal with the issues that building commercial properties, especially huge ones, create to our homes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Chris, who do you have next?
I have one more caller, caller 3, and we don't know who you are, so when you get on mute, can you please identify yourself and tell us the approximate area you're calling from? Caller 3, *6 to unmute.
My name is Etham Nimmer.
Yes, you're here. We can hear you.
Okay, great. So like Cynthia has said, being in a 50-feet storage facility and 35 feet on a residential property is ridiculous.
Can you please state your name and location?
I said my name is Etham Nimmer. I live at the 6502 Panorama Drive, where the parking lot would be located at. If a commercial property would be there. I do not appreciate the feelings that you all have said about how we do not care. As a community in Carroll County, where we've been seen with a town hall, we're spending in the millions. You are working for us, not the opposite. It's all about buildings, buildings, buildings. We need more of a residential property in a commercial, like where you have you want to construct a what's it called, a storage facility, which thankfully that got shut down. But we need a more appropriate response than just, okay, maybe a 35 feet, it could be there, or maybe a 30 feet. We need a less than that, something more of a residential site requirements there, and maybe even rezoning it to a residential where maybe homes can be built there. Not townhomes, not apartments, but the same look and feel of the current residential area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No other callers?
That's all I have on the line, sir.
Okay, Roberta, who do we have here?
Okey-dokey. The first is Audrey Novak. If you come to the microphone there, state your name and address, and 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Audrey Novak. For 33 years, I have lived at 6505 Carroll Highlands Road in Eldersburg. I want to thank you, commissioners, for all the time and effort that you have put into considering the changes in the zoning for the proposed residential adjacent properties. If I may, I would like to address and respond to some of the discussion from the December 21st open session. There seemed to be a hesitancy to change the zoning codes because it would impact existing commercial buildings. Our community has only asked for revision going forward before the shovels are in the ground. And I think you did note that prior buildings would not be impacted. It was expressed that the changes would only affect about 3 or 4 people, when indeed there are many more residents surrounding the Carroll Highlands property, and many more citizens who are concerned about the integrity of our neighborhoods. And that was evidenced, as Commissioner Rothstein mentioned at that meeting, by the attendance at his town hall meeting last year. An example of a building adjacent to a residential property that's higher than 35 feet was the Northrop Realty building. South of the building is the Haight Funeral Home property, and there is only one house adjacent. I have a picture of it if you'd like me to pass it so you can see what I'm talking about. The back elevation is no higher than the adjacent house, as the first floor of this building is underground. The building is also in keeping with zoning 158.158, Article C, and I'm quoting from the zoning. The front of the building shall be designed, constructed, and maintained to be visually compatible with the neighborhood and the surrounding properties. That would not be an objectionable property if it were next to my property. So here, in summary, here are the changes that have been requested since the beginning of this process. And the beginning started almost 2 years ago. In March, it will be 2 years since this process started. While the proposed Planning and Zoning Commission revisions would limit the height of the buildings to 35 feet, I would also ask that you limit the setback from adjacent residential properties to 50 feet. 15 still doesn't seem big enough. This would help to maintain the quality of our neighborhoods and indeed be in keeping with the Freedom District Plan. You've already addressed the grandfathering, so I don't have to talk about that. The third thing that we had requested, and I don't think it's been even considered, would be to restrict multi-level storage buildings to be located in industrial zoned areas and not in C2. Lastly, and I think I heard some of this from the two callers, I am concerned that our community has been characterized as not wanting anything on that lot. And I think I speak for my neighbors when I say that we have worked hard to build a stable community, and we work cooperatively with the existing commercial properties around us or businesses. We ask.
Finish your thoughts.
Sure. We ask that our county work together with us to improve an already desirable residential community and also the other residential communities across the county. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Ms. Nancy Lynch.
Hi, Nancy Lynch, 6503 Carroll Highlands Road. The storage facility that started this whole discussion is no longer being built, but it's important to understand why over 2,000 residents together signed a petition and hundreds attended the town hall to oppose a building that would be 50 foot tall and would tower over our neighborhood. The biggest objection was that the only entrance, and it would be built to be a huge construction entrance, was not going to be on Liberty Road, but Carroll Highlands. I just want to show you, this is Liberty Road. The entrance to this site has always been off Liberty, but this was going to be off Carroll Highlands, right up against our property line with our house right there. And we understood it was going to be a huge construction entrance with heavy equipment. The footprint of that building was going to be enormous. It was going to be 100 by 200 feet, 102,000 total square feet. C2 zoned land only allows for a maximum of 60,000. So I don't even know how that was going to be possible. In the original plans, it was going to be over 900 units, 5 stories. They reduced it to 750 so that there would be no traffic study required. They received a parking variance to reduce the required number of parking spaces from 95 to 25, despite the concerns of the neighbors about the increase in traffic with more trucks on our tiny 90-foot wide street. 20-foot wide street. Thank you, Joe. There were significant issues brought up by many of the county agencies during the technical review. The site distance requirement couldn't be met. That's how far you can turn and safely. You can't change the contour of our tiny street and be able to move safely. It was a major concern. Another variance, I think, would have to have been requested. We're not sure if it was the lawsuit over the deed restriction or these issues brought up during technical review that caused a previous developer to withdraw their application. But these issues remain with the site. And to vote to approve a sliding scale that would still allow a building to be built 50 feet tall, only 30 feet from a residential property line, well, we're back to right where we started 8 months ago, when you decided to take a hard look at what you're going to allow next to established residential neighborhoods. The Freedom Comprehensive Plan states, "The government will not attempt to fundamentally transform communities against the will of existing homeowners and residents. Recognizing that Freedom is a suburban rural area, government will respect the character of the community and its neighborhoods."
Thank you.
Next is Melinda Detmer.
Hi, I'm Melinda Detmer from 6807 Autumn View Drive in the Carroll Highlands development. I've been a resident there off and on for 57 years because I was born there, seen a lot of changes. And honestly, I'm here, I have no homework prepared or anything. I'm here because I heard through the gossip hotline, the internet, that two of the county commissioners said that we wouldn't show up and we wouldn't care and we don't support it. So I'm here to show the support for all my neighbors who have done their work and for the commissioners who are trying to find a happy medium. That's all. I'm just here to show support for the development. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next is Joyce Binnick.
As I hobble up. My name is Joyce Binnick, and I live at 6513 Panorama Drive. And first, thank you for considering our concerns. It's very much appreciated. We understand the challenge that you're facing to facilitate commercial development while preserving the residential character. With each property being unique and 20% of properties falling into this category, to find one formula to fit all seems almost impossible. But setting the height and setbacks are the two major components. And I do agree with Aubrey and Nancy on everything that they stated. And I will say I was very surprised to learn that a commercial building can be built 15, I believe if I have it right, 15 feet away from the property line of a residential home. When we built our one-room addition, the code, it needed to be 25 feet away from the property. So it's very interesting to me. Just a little side note, a resident on 1 acre is allowed to have 3 large dogs. So it's very surprising that a huge commercial building could be built on 1.3 acres, just, you know. So what we're asking is that the height of the building and setbacks accommodate the privacy. We're just trying to have adequate space and privacy. We also ask to please consider putting guidelines in for the commercial buildings to fit into our community, since it seems that the planning board requirements override the Freedom Comprehensive Plan. So enforcing guidelines for commercial buildings that align with the aesthetics of the residential areas promotes a cohesive look and feel. And this seems to be a win-win for both business and residents to thrive together. Our other concerns and questions are, will there be any requirements for noise and lighting control? Set standards for noise levels and outdoor lighting will minimize disturbances to residential areas both during the day and night. Will there be any requirements for landscaping and green space? A certain percentage of the property dedicated to landscaping and green space would be a buffer zone and preserve the natural environment. Will there be size restrictions for the floor area of commercial buildings to prevent them from dominating the surroundings and to maintain a sense of scale within the residential context? Are there parking considerations to avoid congestion and to minimize visual impact?
Please finish your thoughts.
Last thought. Striking a balance between functionality and aesthetics promotes harmony, enhancing the overall appeal of the neighborhood without introducing an industrial vibe. And again, thank you for considering our concerns.
Thank you.
And the last card I have, so if there are any more out there, please provide them to me. But the last one is Stephanie Szymanski.
Good morning, I'm Stephanie Szymanski. I live at 710 Old Baltimore Road here in Westminster. And my comments are that everyone here, I agree with what they've said, and that I go back a long ways. I grew up in Eldersburg, and I think that these minimums that are being proposed and the 35-foot, that's even still pretty big, for any area in Carroll County, any housing, any place that someone lives in, they're not going to want to live next to a 50-foot building, no matter what it's for. I just like to see at one time there was a real push for saying that Carroll County was rural. And those of us who grew up in Eldersburg kind of laughed because we knew that wasn't really true. We grew up watching the farmland being taken over by developments, by commercial entities, and some of those have worked out okay. And I think that everybody here is being very reasonable in suggesting that the commercial work with the residential and that it be to make it complement and not be a giant building sitting next to a one-story, three-bedroom rancher. That kind of stuff I found it, growing up, I found it very difficult to understand. It's one of the reasons I wound up in Westminster, but of course I live really close to where the Chick-fil-A is going. So I'll be talking to the folks at the city. It's just, I'm not quite sure how to be eloquent about this, but it would be nice if there was some way to start creating some spaces, especially in places that for 60-some years have been told, well, you're where the development's going, to be said, let's have a little easement there. Let's have a little bit of space for people to live and to enjoy their quality of life, which is, I think, what we're really saying. Instead of just being rural, it's a quality of life that Carroll has always espoused. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And the last card I have is for Kelly Miller.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kelly Miller.
You can tilt that up if you, yeah.
You don't want to watch me just squat all the time.
It's not a Pilates
Thank you.
class.
Kelly Miller, 73 East Main Street, Westminster, Maryland, 21157. I'm here today on behalf of a few property owners with some general comments for you that are not necessarily contrary to some of the sentiments that have been shared so far. So here we go. First of all, I would ask you to consider that some of the uses allowed in the commercial districts are residential uses. And so there are instances where there are developers or property owners of commercial property that want to develop it with residential uses. And this proposed amendment does not take that into consideration. So I would suggest that you consider that the use being proposed and the adjoining use have an impact. And your intent here, I presume, is to protect the single-family residential properties that have spoken here today. But you might also have situations, and I would submit to you that you do in fact have situations in the county where you have a multi-story condo building, which is residential, on residentially zoned property that abuts a commercially zoned property. It's also possible that that commercially zoned property may want to put an assisted living facility on it. So these are situations that are likely to arise that would be negatively impacted by this text amendment, when I do not think that was the initial intent of this amendment. So I bring that to your attention. I would second bring to your attention that there are some architectural elements of design that we may want to encourage as a county in terms of first floor parking above an actual use. We don't see too many right now in the county, but we're starting to see some. There are also some architectural design that result in roof peaks that might exceed the height allowance that are not usable floor area, but that are, just provide an interesting architectural element, and we may be discouraging that by lowering the height here. And last, I would suggest that you consider expanding the grandfathering that's been proposed by staff. And when I say that, what I mean is there are property owners who have started a process, a site plan process, a Board of Zoning Appeals process, and committed substantial financial investments to these properties under the existing code as it's written, in good faith that those were the requirements. So I would suggest that you expand the grandfathering proposed to anyone with a valid BZA approval or that has started the site plan process. That would also be in keeping with the most recent comprehensive text amendment and rezoning, where there was a similar grandfathering provision for those types of property owners. So that's a lot to think about, but I offer those thoughts to you as just general comments on the proposed amendment. Thank you.
You're still
Thank
seen
you.
as a Schaefer.
Thank you. Schaefer Miller. Schaefer's my legal middle name, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Unless
That's
there's
it. Commissioners, any questions, comments?
I have a few comments. Another reason why I hate's a bad word, dislike social media, because I don't know what comments were made. I try to surf it once in a while to see what's out there, but I do not like anonymous and all this other garbage that's out there, and people spewing things, because I'm not sure what on social media is being said about us not listening. So that's my opening salvo. And for the comments that were made about our responsibility as commissioners working for you, I 100% agree. In that sentiment and in that expectation, because we do not work for developers or others or staff, and we do not allow staff the authority to do the jobs that were given to us as elected officials by you. So that's very important. A lot was shared, and I think a lot was shared in the direction that we're going, and that's why we had that it wasn't quite a town hall, a community event a few months ago with a lot of comments that were made that got us to where we are now. The discussions, the day meeting comment I got, unfortunately, were not convenient for everyone. That's why I do my town halls twice during the day, but it is difficult and challenging, and I appreciate all of you that are here and those that do reach in, and you can also email and contact us, because I think we're all work to be extremely receptive to you. The compromise that's being made of 35 feet to align with residential, I think is going in the right direction. I feel that sometimes I like the Freedom Plan and sometimes I don't. I didn't write it, I embraced it when I came in office, and that's what I shared, folks, because it was in place in November of 2018, I think is when it was finally put in place. So I said, okay, I own it now, and I'm going to embrace this. The challenge is, and we know this, and I've had lots of conversations with Marion, with Chris, and others, there's conflict between the Freedom Plan and our, ordinances, our laws on zoning, and we've got to balance that. So there's things in the Freedom Plan that are, unfortunately, to me, too subjective, and but it does give us guidelines and vision, and I think that's what it really was designed to do overall. And I'm looking forward to establishing the newest master plan in 2025, and I think we're on our way with the economic study and land use study and that Commissioner Gordon highlighted during his State of the County address and the importance of that. So, and it's input from you. It's input from the community that drives us to make these decisions. It's input from you that we're sitting here today talking about this. You know, as far as maximum heights of 50 feet not being fair next to residential. And the setbacks, the interesting one was 15 feet not being far enough. Honestly, I was focused more on the height than I was on the setback, the yard setback. I think what most of you are Eldersburg in District 5, and we're looking at one specific area. If we look at the entire county, by putting these rules and laws in place, how much opportunities are lost is important to understand, because this brings revenue into the county. And as we develop and bring revenue into the county, we maintain our other points of revenue that we control, like income, property, and recordation taxes at a, you know, where they are. We haven't touched them in 12 years. And last time we touched them, we reduced them, our revenue. So we got to continue to look at the revenue in order to provide the services. That's why some of the growth that we're seeing is very important. And we maintain and sustain the important growth that that's going to allow us that revenue while maintaining the Carroll County that we want to live in. I'm open to the discussion of, you know, reducing the heights from 50 feet, even knowing it would take away opportunities of other parts of the county, and to look at a 35-foot height restriction. And I'm even open to that 35-foot height restriction with a sliding scale, if it makes sense, and if it's appropriate. And I also encourage any builder that wants to build near residential areas, and this is something I've been pushing and been relatively successful, is that that builder or developer reaches out to the community, and I will allow them, you know, I will, you know, push them to reach out to the community. Mary and the team also does the same, and we've done it for the Beatty property and the Zabel property and this property, and the property over at the Salerno's property on Johnsville. They had a couple of town halls. That's huge, because then they hear your concerns as well, and it has made adjustments to their developments, significant adjustments to their developments. And that's also why I believe that this last development went away. Now, whether it was pressure of a lawsuit or other, honestly, I don't know. I didn't have those conversations. I just was told by them that we're walking away. I was like, okay, see ya, and we stopped. And now there's somebody else that's interested, and they want to meet you collectively. And I think with these proposed changes, understood, they want to meet with you. And so that's going to be interesting. Let me see, I took a lot of notes. You all gave a lot of good insight and information. The grandfathering issue, I think, is very interesting to add additional grandfathering. I'm not sure if we're all up for doing that or not, but Ms. Miller brought that up, and that was interesting. I had not thought about furthering the grandfathering. The entrance of this property, I don't know much except that State Highway is becoming a player in this property, and they have a part of that decision to be made. And that's something that we work with our land use and planning, and that's, being integral in this. The parking spaces, there was a point of clarification I wanted from Mary. 60,000 square feet, is that accurate?
The 60,000 square feet is in the table of uses only for retail and service. It doesn't apply to self-storage. So it applies to anything that's defined as general retail or service.
General retailer services is
We have definitions of that
is 60,000 square feet
in the C2.
in the C2.
Yes.
What about storage?
There's not a square footage limit to that.
Okay, yeah, because that kind of threw me, so I wanted that clarification. Let's see if there's anything else. I apologize taking as much time.
No, not at all.
Architectural design, again, was brought up. Interesting how we can conform properties and growth to the community, and that's what somebody brought up about the Hay property and the real estate, and I agree with that. That's also why the Dunkin' Donuts looks like the Dunkin' Donuts, is to conform and look like the community. So, okay. I'll stop for now and let others, I apologize taking so long, so.
No, not at all. If everybody's okay, I'll say a couple things next. So I agree with, a lot of what Commissioner Rothstein said. I'm certainly open to height maximums and increasing the setbacks. This does remind me in a lot of ways about the discussion we had about community solar going back to last year. And for me, as someone who as all my fellow commissioners who genuinely love this county and genuinely want it to be what it is, that question of fittingness always comes into play. Just because something can go somewhere, it doesn't necessarily mean that it fits. And so that's certainly why I'm open to a discussion about height maximums and the setbacks and whatnot. And I think that there are also very valid concerns expressed about privacy and screening, and because these are things that do fall under that category of fittingness, right? Whether or not somebody's looking down in your backyard from 50 feet high up, but I also understand the point of the sliding scale. A point was made that what fits for one area may not fit for all areas. And, we do our best to find points of compromise and common ground so that something makes sense for as many places as possible. And while on a smaller parcel of land, a 50-foot building does not make sense, maybe somewhere else in the county, perhaps possibly in the northern part of the county where there are some larger properties, right? A 50-foot height might make sense depending on the maximum level of the setback allowable. And so I think that sliding scale, again, I'm certainly open to considering adjustments on that because I certainly would not want to look out my window and look into somebody's office, or vice versa for that matter. I certainly also take to heart the concerns about ingress and egress and where that occurs as well. If you're expecting a tremendous amount of traffic from any business without a clear major thoroughfare or viaduct to get out of there, then I certainly understand concerns about residential streets being used in ways that they were never intended to be used. And the last thing that I will say before I don't want to take up too much time either, I do certainly take points about the noise and the lighting concerns as well, because there are certain commercial uses that do have more intensive lighting and more intensive noises emanating from those particular uses. So I'm certainly open to discussions about how those may or may not be limited, or whether or not that would fall under, I guess, I don't know whether that falls under the category of screening, or even to some degree falls under the category of how far the setback is. But yeah, those are my initial thoughts, and I do want to thank everybody for coming out. And I can honestly say, just to jump on the social media topic for just one moment, I've never heard any of my fellow commissioners say, oh, nobody cares, nobody's going to show up. I've never heard any of them say that. So if anybody's ever said something to you that, oh, they don't care, we do. We really do. If we did not care about this, we would make these public hearings as quick as we could. We wouldn't be paying attention. Look at Commissioner Rothstein or Commissioner Kyler. And I can look further down the dais here. Everybody is taking notes. Everybody's taking these things to heart. You know, that's why we are having this discussion and not just a public hearing, why we are putting our own thoughts out there, not just so that we as a governing body can understand where the others stand, but also so that you can understand where we are, and following this to continue to let us know, you know, how you feel about any number of issues going forward for anything. So again, I cannot be emphatically clear about that enough, that no one up here has ever said to me, nobody cares, nobody's going to show up. And it's not just us, it's anybody who works in this building or anybody who works as a part of this county anywhere. You know, we serve the same community. I was, okay, this is the last thought. So I just finished reading a really, really beautiful book called What is Christianity? And it's a collection of writings by the late Pope Benedict XVI, and it's all of his final writings. And in one of the essays that he has in there, he talks about priesthood and the service of the church. And there's specifically a quote in there where he talks about anybody who's in service, and the quote is, "To serve is to draw near." Obviously, you know, whether you're talking about God or whether you're talking about the community that you serve, and none of us can effectively do our jobs if we don't hear from you, if we don't draw near to what it is that's at issue. And so again, I thank everybody for coming out to say that. And again, everybody up here takes what you say very seriously. And that's it for me for now.
As a lifelong Catholic, it's tough to follow up on that one. I don't want to even get
Nobody can
close.
follow the Pope.
I don't
Nobody
want to
can
even get close to anything profound. Again, I think these recommendations are a step in the right direction. I don't know if they go far enough, and I do appreciate the Planning and Zoning Commission's work on this and the staff, because this is something we brought you about 8-10 months ago. It's a long process. I remain concerned about some of these setbacks. They're not enough. And I don't see anywhere where we take into account the terrain itself, and that's a concern of mine. You know, if you're building on a lot that's already 15 feet above everyone around you, then now, you know, effectively you've built a 50-foot structure. So that's obviously a concern of mine. I mean, the issue of revenue came up briefly, and I mean, I'm looking out at people who live adjacent to this, and I'm seeing people who have contributed to the property taxes and the county income taxes for 50-plus years in some cases. So, you know, what you say and what you think matters. It's mattered for a long time, and that should never change. So I know we don't want to do any harm to commercial and industrial. In fact, you know, if anything, we need to be enhancing the effectiveness of those in the county and creating more of that. But, you know, when I see people come together as a neighborhood and in the numbers that you did, and you're already there contributing to revenue, you're already contributing property taxes, you're paying income taxes, you've worked hard to stay here in this county, you should never be told that nothing can be done. Ever. I don't think that's an acceptable thing to be told. And my understanding is that's what you were told. So I'm glad we're here now doing this. I think we're going to have some healthy differences of opinion on the board as to how far these should go, but I am pleased that at least we're moving in the right direction. And again, it's important to mention that these are going to affect commercial projects adjacent to residential. Adjacent. It's just important not to lose sight of that as we move forward for people who may be on the other side and that are rightfully concerned about the impacts it might have. So, thanks.
What were they said they couldn't be done? Just so I know.
Excuse me?
What were they told that couldn't be done?
Well, I don't know, you had your meeting with 250 people,
Yeah.
and they were told nothing could be done. Staff was there as well, and my understanding, they were told nothing could be done to
That's not
change okay, well,
Yeah, no,
that's not what I heard, so, all right. Gee.
No, that definitely wasn't true. In fact,
I know it was videotaped, and I watched it.
No, and your impact of the community caused us to be here and caused everything. It was this impact from you that got us to where we are now. The ordinances that were in place at that time said that correctly that storage facility design was adequate with the ordinance. Your input caused us to look at the ordinances to make these changes. Your voice matters. Absolutely. It's not, that this whole idea of, again, developers and other things, it's your voice. It matters. And you are changing the way we are looking at ordinances. So, okay, I just wanted a point of clarification so I understood what couldn't be done. And you're right, at that moment, it was just, hey, this is where it's at. But, okay. And just, I misspoke regarding revenue. No matter how much residential or property we develop, it is not going to move our revenue much on the needle, you know? I mean, we don't have enough space, we don't have enough growth in Carroll County that's going to be moving the revenue needle much, whether it's residential or commercial industrial. That's going to be a big concern, especially with some of the things coming up. So I did misspoke on that, and I apologize. So,
Mr. Gordon?
Thank you. A lot of the comments that have been said here today, I agree with from a variety of my colleagues. I will bring up one thing that's been touched on this morning by us, and just to kind of put this out there for everybody, if you have the ability and time, get on the county website and look at that economic land use study. There's a lot of information there, and it does play into the residential next to industrial or commercial or retail. But I think the reality is we have to take a deep dive into that information and look at what those details are. Some of that might actually surprise you. It's a reason why I spoke about it at the State of the County, because there were things I knew, and then there were things I learned that I thought I knew, and then I found out what the background information on that is. And it does put us in some interesting positions for years to come. That's not to say we should or shouldn't modify zoning because of those issues. It's just a fact of we need to be very cognizant of where we're headed and where we currently stand. I just want to bring that up real quickly, but I do also want to point out, as the ex officio on planning and zoning, this was a hot topic for us for a number of months. I can tell you, everyone from staff to everybody on planning and zoning took this very seriously. One of the individuals on planning and zoning, I think, said it best when they made the comment in one of our meetings, we're never going to get to nirvana on this. It's never going to be perfect, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, and that doesn't mean things shouldn't be amended or changed when they need to be. And I'm not going to speak for my colleagues this morning because that's not my place, but I will agree with Commissioner Vigliotti's comment earlier. We do hear you, I hear you, and we do listen, and we try to take everyone into account when we can in these decisions. It's not a case of any of us, and I will agree with him completely, I've never heard anyone make a statement that any of us don't care. That is definitely, and I'm not usually going to go there, but I am this morning, that's definitely farthest from my knowledge of anything. The five of us work really, really hard for you. It's an interesting job at times, and we face a lot of daily challenges that one day we're on one side of dealing with something and the next we're on a completely different topic. But the reality is we're here to serve you. That's why we ran for these jobs. That's why we were elected. And I take all your comments to heart. I listen to them, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate all the feedback. And the reality is I listen to those, and I do take those to heart. So thank you.
Thank you. And I have a few things, and maybe some questions for staff in it. But firstly, I want to point out, yeah, I think we all care. Unfortunately, in today's world, and I don't even want to get on social media and those idiots, but when you differ in opinion, automatically you're wrong, you don't care, whatever. One of the things I like about this board, and Commissioner Guerin said it, we're going to have some debates. And we're going to vote. And I don't know what the results are going to be, but I've been the one when it's 4-1. I've been the 4 when it's 4-1, and I respect the decisions. One of my big concerns about this is unintended consequences. And I've said this before. I don't care whether it's one person, one property, one whatever. When you start making dramatic changes because of something that happens on one piece of property, you're affecting the entire county and every property on it. We could well go with this and make a commercial property unbuildable. And we have to consider that too. And so unintended consequences I worry about. Somebody mentioned who we represent. We represent all of the taxpayers in Carroll County. Some of them are developers, some of them are builders, some of them are construction companies. I would never advocate for this, but if you really want me to look at who pays the most tax dollars and represent them, you're going to be very unhappy. So yes, we represent all of Carroll County. I am concerned about the grandfathered part of it, particularly if we make too much of a change. And I'm curious if you guys, and let me finish up, and if you guys want to say something about that today, exactly how this would grandfather and should we talk about it. The one comment made earlier, maybe by a caller, we're building. I've been in this county a few years. I've seen some unchecked growth years ago. I've seen some stop growth mentalities. I've seen very few controlled growth scenarios. Based on our public school system, we've had declining enrollment up until the last maybe 2 years. So I don't know that there's a big building boom going on in Carroll County right now. And I think we need to make some serious choices. And I've asked people, I mean, I live on a small property. Am I ready to pay double taxes for my property taxes and not let anybody else come in the county? I'm not sure that I really want to do that. I'd like to see controlled growth, and I think we're trying to work hard to do that. And this board, we only been here a little over a year, but we have been more advocates for change than I've seen in a lot of boards in my time in Carroll County. So we're not opposed to change, but I am concerned about unintended consequences. I shouldn't be thinking ahead. It doesn't work. I am concerned also about the roof lines. I mean, what if a church-type building with a high roof line and then they want to do bells on top of it, are we limiting them? What are we limiting with this? And I feel for everybody about this property. And then my last comment, and then if staff wants to say anything, as far as people coming, we're here. We're here for the day. I'd love to hear more than 8 people talk about this. Now, it is impressive. You did some petitions, and there were some larger numbers on it, but still 2,000 out of 170,000, is that significant or not? I'm not sure. But no, I'd love to hear people come out, and we've done public meetings, and we've tried to encourage people to come out. We allow the call-ins, and for the record, my philosophy on that, I didn't ask anybody to finish their thoughts until 10 or 15 seconds after the allowed 3 minutes. So, it's tough when you have a bunch of comments, and I recognize you guys are passionate, so I hope you feel okay with the allowed time that you did get to comment, since many of you are spending a half a day sitting here. So thank you for coming, and thank you for your comments. Do you guys want to talk about roof lines or grandfathering or any of the other things today, or would you rather do a response?
I was going to say, can I just, because Commissioner Gordon, you've been on the planning commissions from the get-go.
Yep.
We've had 4 open sessions that focused on it, which is a lot. I mean, I've been on planning commission, I think, a couple years last term, and I don't remember having that many sessions. So obviously, the planning commission took this one to heart, because
Absolutely.
It's a difficult decision, because it's not just, like Commissioner Kyler said, one part of the county. There's a lot of areas, and the secondary, tertiary effects and the unintended consequences, really do matter. So appreciate the thoroughness that the planning commission took on this. And then the recommended, or proposed language from, that's written for the public hearing, that came from the planning commission? Okay. I mean, can we, and there's 4 highlighted areas, if you can bring that up. Can we get a census on where we're standing before, on this from us? I mean, the 35 height maximum, I mean, from us, I agree with that. I mean, I think there's been enough drive and discussion.
Well, I've got a question
Yeah.
too, but before
Yeah.
we say where we're at, again, I'm worried about how we're affecting a lot of other properties. And my question would be, can we look at, I shouldn't say should we, can we, making certain things that we're trying to restrict as a conditional use? So it would be through that process, and, and again, everybody gets to comment on that process. So if I build a 35-foot building, in the code, that happens. If I want to do a 45, it's a conditional use, and therefore the public gets to comment on that site. Is that worth thinking about, or am I, and I'll say it, am I being stupid? You just tell me.
Don't say it, Hannah. No, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm gonna have to think about that one. So, in the standard sense, and Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, the principal permitted and conditional, those refer to uses, right? And this
Yes.
is a bulk requirement. So it's typically not the type of thing that would go before a Board of Zoning Appeals for that kind of change, unless it was in appeal of what the zoning administrator makes a decision on, right? And so if you ask for a variance on the height of your building, the zoning administrator would make a decision. If that was appealed by a party who was involved in it, that would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So that's how it would get to them. Putting a bulk requirement as a condition to go to, I don't believe that's a normal practice.
Yeah.
It's not, unless you wanted to take specific uses and make them from principal permitted to conditional, and then have conditions outlined in the code that should be looked at, like height.
Yeah.
Right.
And a good example of that, because I agree. I mean, well, first off, just because it was doesn't mean it should be moving forward. So if we see making better sense of something, then let's move forward in making better sense of it. The property that's on Johnsville, a while back, a few years ago, they wanted to look at building a gas station on that. And the community came out and said, we don't want a gas station. Said, this is definitely not the place, besides having all these gas stations all over, this is not the place. We have really challenges with this. And it influenced us. This was a great example, again, if you look at, is it allowed? Sure, it's allowed. It's in the C, whatever property. It's allowed. But because the community came out, and again, it's, we made adjustments, and we then made it from permitted to conditional. And the reason is a gas station wasn't necessary there on that type of commercial property, but it could be necessary in another part of the county commercial property. A storage facility may not be necessary here, but it could be necessary in another part. That's why we start looking at conditional uses. Again, if we look at the law and the ordinances that are in place, a gas station would have been allowed, and everybody would have been like, oh, man. But no, the community came out and said, we don't want this, and this is why. It had us take a look at, okay, let's change the rules. We're allowed to do that. That's our job. So I think that, that could be a way to look at this is, do we agree with 35 height maximum? Sure. Are we looking at the side yard setbacks? Well, maybe we should be looking at a, with the type of use, there should be a larger setback. I don't want to split hairs on this, but it's it could be important to look at it that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's a very important point is to talk about the scope of what we are addressing today, correct? So the scope is very specific to commercial bulk requirements, and bulk requirements being setbacks and height and so on the commercial district adjacent to the residential district. So that would have the effect on all such properties in the entire county. I recognize and appreciate the concern about this one specific property, but to Commissioner Kyler's point, there may be unintended consequences. If the concern is to a particular use, such as self-storage, we could certainly broach that subject with Planning and Zoning Commission to explore that avenue as far as the appropriateness in certain zoning districts, certain bulk requirements specific to that use and so on. But that would be a separate discussion. I just want to make sure we stay to the scope of what is before us today.
I mean, Commissioner Gordon, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's potentially a worthy conversation to take up, and I think planning and zoning, I think, would be open to it. I mean, I know the number of conversations we had, it was very in-depth, and I don't think that would be an issue. I think they'd be happy to consider taking that up. I don't want to speak for the whole committee, but I will say that. Since we're talking about that, though, I wanted to ask a question. So we're looking at commercial districts that are adjacent to residential districts, and obviously Commissioner Kyler is talking about unintended consequences, and we're all very familiar with the property that brought this to our attention. Obviously, there's different uses for different types of properties. Would it be possible for us to get a countywide map and a count of some type to show us the amount of properties that this would potentially affect, you know, if changed or adjusted? I would be curious to see regionally, is there certain sectors of the county that are going to be much more affected if we were to make those decisions? I just would be curious to see that if we could.
Yes, we can pull that together.
Okay.
And to speak to the unintended consequences, we had that work session where we looked at some of the properties.
Yes.
And speaking to setbacks, for instance, if certainly 15 feet does not sound like a whole lot, right? And 15 feet on this property that we've been talking about on Carroll Highlands is not a whole lot. But if you then go to a property in Hampstead where the overall property width is only 50 feet, and you take 15-foot setbacks and then increase those, you essentially could make that property unusable because this has the impacts across the entire county. So, but yes, we can produce that information and share that with the board.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why when I was looking at this, if we take a look and break it down, we can get a consensus from us. Yeah, let's move forward with this, give you guidance on setbacks, give you, and this way, we're bringing it down to a more focused area for you to then provide us with, okay, here are the consequences in this decision, because that's what this is really all about. So,
But I've still got one more question. On this piece of property and the site plan we had, 10 to 15 foot was irrelevant.
Correct.
It was 50 feet, 60 feet?
With the proposed design that has been withdrawn, the smallest setback that the developer was proposing was 70 feet from
Okay, so it would have been 70 feet from anything.
Yes.
How tall did the building end up, not considering the topo?
So we did not receive, so we had our initial technical comments. We did not get a resubmission. We heard verbally that the developer was talking about lowering the overall height of the building because of some of these concerns.
Because I'm concerned, we're so into changing all this, so if the building would have been 15 foot less tall in the exact same location, everybody be happy? No, I see shaking heads, yeah, so
that wasn't the design. I think they were at 40 feet. They were looking at maybe possibly going one sub-level, but at 40 feet as a minimum. I mean, it was not going to fit. And to meet their desires and their
So if it was
pocketbooks,
5 foot shorter, everybody and 70 foot from a property line, everybody's happy.
that's why we did what we did. And
Oh, I
that's why-
know,
yeah,
but
that's
I'm
why
just
we did
saying, I don't
guidance.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is gonna fix this piece of property, and I don't know that this isn't gonna harm many other properties. And that's why I said
Yeah,
about conditional, you know, it's, and like you said, the zoning administrator wouldn't have had anything to rule on in this piece of property.
Right.
And this piece of property seems more unique, and that's good and that's bad. Like, for instance, I feel for the fact that the state won't let them have an entrance on the state highway, but
So if I may respond to that, so there was a bit of a conflict, as it were, between agencies, to put it in. So from one perspective, State Highway looks at it that the property has access to Carroll Highlands. State Highway wants to limit access onto a state roadway, obviously. So their comment was, well, you should access onto Carroll Highlands. From a county perspective, there was a site distance issue. And so a waiver was going to be required for site distance. From a county perspective, our county DPW say, well, you also have access onto a state highway roadway, so why should we issue a variance for site distance? So there was going to be that discussion between county DPW and the state highway administration as far as what the best access for that property would be. But that is a moot point now because it's been withdrawn.
yeah, and state highway likes to limit a lot of the accesses. If there wouldn't have been the opportunity to come out on the county road, they'd have probably had to give access. And so, like I say, that makes this property worse than several others. You know, it's tough. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think, again, from the process, and we've done it a lot, you know, from the last board I've been on and this board, is when the community says something, we take it and we grab it. The way it's said at that moment may be one answer, but we grab it and we make the changes appropriate. And like, you know, Commissioner Gordon participating on the Planning Commission, I mean, 4 sessions, and Mary and Hannah, and I think they came up with a solution that can meet the needs, one, of this community, but also of the county. I would be interested to, I mean, maybe it's, maybe I'm flipped. Maybe it's, this is adequate for this area, but other areas should look at higher bulk requirements. I mean, just because we didn't do it before regarding bulk requirements and looking at the variances, maybe that is a way to do it that could alleviate some of these properties that are non-usable, because we want to ensure that property owners can do the things they want to be able to do in accordance with whatever rules are out there. And I don't know. I'm not torn on this so much, because I think this gets us to where we want to go. And I think, I think we can move forward with this. I am not more interested, I'm as interested in the rest of the county, kind of, you know, we represent the county, and what are the impacts of the county? I'd be curious how many properties are then disqualified if we go with this, that are in the county. That's kind of where Commissioner Gordon was with his question.
So we do have the countywide map, and it does show that there's a number of properties along 140, certainly the Sykesville Freedom area, up along 30, Hampstead, Manchester, Taylorsville, Tawnytown. So we do see that it is countywide, and we do have a breakdown of those by acreages. What we probably couldn't tell you is which ones you're making unusable, because it would depend on the use. There's so many uses allowed. A 7-Eleven is small, but a larger, so we may not be able to give you exactly what you're asking for. What we can, and we presented it to the Planning Commission, is the map of where it is, how many they are, what size they are. Did we have any other details?
Just from what I remember, this is impacting about 20% of the entire commercially zoned properties in the county. So 20% of our commercial land is adjacent to residential zoned properties.
And already by your rules, there's certain uses that don't fit on some of the properties.
Oh, sure. Some of them were very small, so something the size that we've been discussing wouldn't be eligible for it
Yeah.
anyways. That's why it would be, getting the
Okay.
precise information you may be looking for could be difficult, but we can certainly give you what we have again.
Are we ready for a motion to close the hearing, or?
Well, I think, how painful would it be to make bulk requirements like this conditional?
Conditional on the use?
Yeah.
So,
That would be very different. I mean, normally a conditional use is a gas station, a hotel.
Right, no, I know.
Yeah.
I know
The
that.
typical relief valve for these type of requirements is a variance, unless I'm.
right,
Oh, is it a variance?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
if you didn't tell me I was stupid, but I
No.
probably
Yeah.
shouldn't have brought
No,
it
no,
up.
no, and-
It
know
was
you-
just a
you-
thought
you-
on
you brought me
giving
down
public
this
more
rabbit
input,
hole.
you know, but I can see why this would get pretty twisted.
Yeah, what I would recommend, I think I understand the direction that you might be interested, is that consider the bulk requirements that these apply to all uses, right? And so on, right? If there is an inclination to look at a specific use, such as self-storage units or something like that, we can certainly have those discussions with Planning Commission in return, and we can have specific conditions related to those uses. So if you wanted to change, for example, self-storage to be a conditional use in certain zoning districts, that's something that could certainly be done.
And that's really a different topic, so.
Yes.
We could make a decision on this and still pursue that.
Absolutely.
And also, there are several uses around the county that have specific bulk requirements because they have such a heavy impact.
Right.
Yes.
You know, if you have a heavy industrial use, it's going to have a longer setback than something that has less of an impact. So, when you look at those specific uses, you can
Yeah.
do the bulk requirements differently for specific uses.
Okay. And because somebody out here brought that up, somebody very wise out here said, why didn't we look at storage facilities as conditional use? You know, so it really is two separate things. One could be, after this, looking at storage facilities as conditional use in C2 zoned areas, properties.
Or any other sort of conditions associated with that particular use.
Yeah, what you
So-
said.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to conclude the public hearing and keep the record open for 10 calendar days.
Second?
Any more discussion?
Is there a need to keep it open?
Well, I'll be honest, there are a couple of things that were brought up that I would like to give a little more thought about. You know, it's not that I disagree in any large way with what's being proposed, but I do have some questions I'd like to pursue about things like screening and things like the setback maximums, so.
And can our attorney tell us, what does that mean to say the public record's open?
That means if you get some more emails from neighbors and things like
So
that.
that
or
means
new
they can
facts.
respond also,
Yes.
which I think we want to let that happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Any,
You have a motion.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Were you asking who made the second? Commissioner Ward made the second.
Bring
Yeah, I
something
just
easy
did.
next time.
Thank you. Others did.
Yeah, easy. You guys do anything that's easy?
Thank you all very much. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
I'm still here.
Okay, I've scribbled so much on my paper, I can't read it. Item 6 is Carroll County Transportation Master Plan.
Give it a minute, let people leave.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry.
Forget your map.
Okay.
Please.
Good morning, again. We are
Good morning
here,
to you
this is,
both.
Claire Stewart, myself, to present to you the 2023 Transportation Master Plan which you received last week, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. Commissioner Gordon's looked at it many a time, so. Planning Commission. And just by way of what we're doing here, this was approved by the Planning Commission on November 14th. Similarly to the economic development study, we see this as one of the building blocks of the upcoming master plan, that this would serve as the foundation for the transportation element. So at this point, unless you want to have further discussions and work sessions, we aren't looking for approval of this. We just feel that this would feed into the master plan, and there are parts of it that we can use now going forward in the development review process. So that's what's important about that.
So you'd prefer we take no action today?
No comment.
The looks on both of their faces when you,
Just a thought.
you're just stirring up trouble left and right today.
Well, it says no action. It says
So,
that.
anyways, just a little brief overview of our process. This began in 2015 with the adoption of the county master plan. This was one of the main recommendations of the transportation element. So in some ways, it's feeding into the next master plan, but it's also one of the final implementation elements of the last master plan. In 2020, we, through the UPWP BMC study, we commissioned a study with Mead and Hunt for a transportation corridor and sub-area study. We met with the 8 municipalities on needs and priorities. That's all described in our process in here. Through 2021 and 2022, we did our best to solicit public input. Those were kind of difficult times to meet in person. Surveys, the county website, we did some kiosks in county buildings, press releases, our .gov delivery, and we continued our direct outreach to the towns and citizens groups, which was really important, especially with the towns, because a lot of these roads are within the towns. So our goal and what we accomplished is this plan has to be consistent with their local plans, as they have their own planning and zoning authority. And then throughout 2022 and 2023, we took, Claire and I did, the major elements of this plan to the Planning Commission. We met, we counted them up, 15 separate meetings, and they really did go road by road and issue by issue. So then last November, they gave it their approval, and we're here today again to brief you on it, answer any questions, and if you have detailed questions and want to schedule a later work session, we'd also be happy to do that. So the purpose of today's meeting is the briefing. There are 9 chapters in this plan. The first 4 are background chapters to give you the information necessary to see what went into our analysis. Chapter 5, again, is the consultant study almost in its entirety. Number 6 is what we consider one of the most important aspects of this. It's an assessment of all of our planned roadway projects, and that's state, local, county, all of them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that point. Then we also have a chapter on access management, which is a very important aspect of transportation planning and the functioning of the system. A short chapter on emerging trends, as this is a long-term plan, and then some recommendations on the last couple pages. What we plan on doing going forward is continue to work with the municipalities. There are 4 that currently have plans underway, and any changes they make, we work with them, and we would obviously want to wrap into this before it reaches our master plan. And again, adoption by you as part of our master plan update. So chapter 1, I won't go into too much detail, but 3 main studies fed into this. Again, the first one, well, not the first one. So 2018, there was what's called a Pell study done on Maryland 32 by SHA, by MDOT. In 2020, there was a corridor study of Maryland 26 done by SHA, and then again, the third one is the consultant study that I mentioned, which included 6 sub-areas of the county. So the vision for Carroll County, and this is important in any plan, I'm going to read it because I think it is one of the most important things. Carroll County is a suburban and rural community where community members travel efficiently by automobile through a safe, well-connected, and functional transportation system. An interconnected network of state, county, and municipal roadways provides access and mobility for people and goods to reach their destinations throughout and beyond Carroll County and its 8 municipalities, protects the quality of life through economic prosperity, and facilitates innovative and emerging technology, and this is the basis of the entire plan. So I won't go through these. These are 4 goals that, do we have the page numbers? I thought we had this.
They come a little bit later.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. There are 4 goals that relate to each chapter. I will not read through these, but they are included in the plan.
These are on page, the vision and goals are on page 2 of your plan.
The second chapter, again, background chapter on demographics. These were all the demographics that are important to planning for transportation. Probably, I'm not going to go through these either, but the most notable one is we have a disparity between employment and residential in this county that causes the majority of workers to leave the county for their employment. There's also some other interesting statistics in
Was
there.
the 60 years based on Commissioner Rothstein's age? Is that how we got that?
No, it's when you were, what, in college back then, right?
Again, on pages 6 and 7, we just noted what the other transportation plans are, and it's important to note, this plan only addresses the road network. It is not a transit plan, an airport plan, a bike ped plan, or a strategic safety plan. We have all those plans, as well as on page 7, we have listed all the state plans, regional, and municipal plans, but this plan is just for the road network. And again, the last of the background chapters is existing facilities. This is simply a table and a map that shows all the road facilities in the county. So chapter 5 was the consultant study, and it identifies how the largest transportation projects in the county and municipal master plans could be implemented incrementally to achieve mobility benefits sooner rather than later. And basically, what it was doing was, we identified 6 sub-areas. These are pages, this is a long one, this is pages 9 through 41. And it recommends thinking beyond major projects, which is the next chapter, which have long been identified and desired in favor of improvements which can maintain or improve today's traffic congestion, even as the number of trips increases. And you'll see through some of these, they were called by the consultant the most promising potential improvements. We called them the MPPIs. And I believe there were 22 of them. We'll get to that. Is it 22? Yeah, it's okay. And some of them were simply operational improvements that could be made at almost no cost. Some of them, adding a turning lane, just looking at it, things you could do before you have this, massive project with MDOT that solves all your problems. It breaks it out. They're basically breakout projects. Some of them are very low cost, and we did discuss these with all the towns as we went through these. And they will probably, the ones that have their master plans underway, their comp plans, will be integrating them into their plans as well.
Just to add, they could be projects that have little environmental constraints, an easier permitting process, or maybe the county already owns right-of-way there. So just to keep that in mind.
So, again, Chapter 5 identifies these most promising potential improvements, which you can see the table of them on page 13. Actually, one of them that I know of has already been completed in Mount Airy, I believe. And these are the 6 corridors that you see: Eldersburg, Sykesville, Finksburg, Hampstead, Manchester, Mount Airy, Tawnytown, and Westminster. And the map on the other side shows you what those, I'm gonna call them, MPPIs are. And then the following pages, up to page, I believe it was 41, gives a very detailed description by area. And each area has a very thorough analysis of the road network, land use and demographics, commuter flows, local goals, existing traffic conditions, recommended approach, benefits, impacts. So each one of the sub-area analysis is very detailed. Again, if you wanted to get into a detailed discussion on those, we could plan for that. But the Planning Commission did get into detail on those. The next chapter, Chapter 6, is all of our planned roadway projects. So since 1964, the beginning of planning and zoning, Carroll County master and comp plans have included an inventory of planned roadway projects. These serve as the guide for necessary transportation improvements and connections as the county develops. And you can see on that slide, it's probably on page 42, the county-wide map that summarizes them. And it also provides a description of what they are and how they're categorized. It also explains what, we have rough cost estimates for these. For the state roads, we included everything that is in our current highway needs inventory called the HNI, which is starting the review and update process with MDOT. We'll be working with them. So any changes they make to that with us, we will obviously integrate into this plan. So that's the important thing about that. So the plan includes an updated analysis of all planned roadway projects in the county. 24 projects were removed, roads were removed, and 44 roadways remain planned major streets and planned neighborhood connections. And for each, you can see there's a map and description of each. And these maps were updated, refined, the descriptions were updated and refined. I could explain to you why some of the 24 were removed, but some of them were completed, some of them are no longer feasible because of right-of-way issues, some of them don't make the connection they would have made. So we worked with Public Works as well as Development Review and the towns on a very detailed analysis of this.
Mary, how is this, the governor's announcement regarding cutting back some serious funding on highway developments across the state? I mean, like 32, he took that away, that requirement, that's.
So we took the construction funding away, but the road still remains as one of the priority roadways. So this is a long-range plan, and when
Yeah.
the CTP issues are shorter term than this plan is.
Okay.
And then after we had these 44 roadways, we ranked them using 10 criteria. And when I say we worked with the Planning Commission on this, obviously. And let me just tell you what the 10 criteria that we used were.
64.
Thank you.
Page 64.
Page 64. Every one of the 44 roadways was evaluated based on safety, inclusion in a designated growth area or priority funding area, safety, functional classification, existing financial support or right-of-way, connectivity, improve operation of existing infrastructure, economic prosperity, immediacy of need, environmental considerations, and a cost-benefit analysis. And then what you see on the next, it's on page 64 and on the next two slides, everything was ranked as high, medium, or low based on planned major streets and planned neighborhood connections. And what we were pleased to see is, given what we consider these 10 important ranking criteria, the things in our CIP, such as Georgetown, Market Street, Monroe, those are considered high priority. So we were gratified, I think, that when we saw the results, it made sense to us given what we're told and what we know about the road network. So, and these could be used by you in formulating your future CIPs. Obviously, these change as well based on anything that changes in those 10 criteria, and we'll be reevaluating them with the master plan. So, Chapter 7 is access management, and access management is the proactive management of vehicular access points to land parcels adjacent to all manner of roadways. It's a set of techniques that can be used to control access to highways, major arterials, and other roadways. It includes things like access spacing, driveway spacing, safe turning lanes, median treatments, and right-of-way management. We currently work with the state on access management for specific projects. This plan is recommending that we implement and adopt these policies in a way that is more legally binding, and the state is in agreement on that we should be doing that. So that's one of the, we didn't accomplish that with this plan, but that is one of the recommendations. And then Chapter 8, we couldn't do a long-range plan without looking at some emerging trends in transportation. So the two obvious are electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. That's on pages 67 through 70. Really, it's just a discussion of what is coming in these areas and what might need to be done. There's no specific recommendations regarding these at this point, but it is something we have to look forward to. So the last chapter is recommendations, and this plan has 22 recommendations in 4 categories. We have general recommendations, transportation corridor and sub-area analysis and planned roadway projects. That was chapters 5 and 6, access management and emerging trends. And I won't run through all these. The general are basically how we're gonna go forward, working with the master plan and making zoning ordinance or other code changes. The second category of transportation corridor and sub-area analysis and planned roadway projects is really how we are going to get what was recommended done, who we will work with, how it will be done. Access management, again, this is an important one, and it's a simple one, but we need to do it. Promote access management best practices along state highways by coordinating with MDOT SHA, and we do plan on doing that. And then with emerging trends, the last one, promoting the transition to electric vehicles, and autonomous vehicles through partnership, education of the public, and evaluation of county codes and policies. That's more of a long-term, especially with the autonomous vehicles, that's more of a long-term recommendation. And this last slide shows our county master plan webpage. So this has been up and running since we began this. We have updated, Claire has updated it after every meeting. It has been a pretty good resource. New slide. Yeah, okay,
This-
so all past meetings with draft documents and slides are included, if anybody wants to go look at all those meetings that we had, as well as we kept an updated version of the plan online. We did have a DocGov delivery mail out that we used when we did this.
Yeah, any PowerPoint presentation, recorded meeting, PDF or Word document that was given to Planning Commission, presented to them, is all in here, so if you ever get bored, there they are.
And that's really all we have for you today. I know it's a lot, so if there's really specific questions, again, we could meet again.
And you probably said this, but I apologize. So what triggers things moving forward? Like it says, you know, municipal plans updated, it's, how active is looking at this moving forward? What triggers it?
What triggers the construction of the facility?
No, you looking at this entire plan. What-
Oh, well, so I think we'll be looking at it incrementally. So we consider it approved by the Planning Commission with every one of the 4 municipal plans that gets adopted in the next year or so, because there's 4 ongoing, there's another one that may be starting. We'll integrate it into it at that point and, you know, make it an addendum. We'll probably, we haven't really talked about process, take it back to the Planning Commission for their reapproval of it, but there's that, there's any construction of a road that's completed, we would take out because we want it to be useful and up to date. So it'll be more us monitoring it till we get to the point of making it our transportation element.
Okay.
You think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Commissioners?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Really well done.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claire.
Commissioner, could I have this opportunity to find out who our callers are?
Sure.
Okay, caller 6, you're the first one up. You've been on there the longest. If you could star 6, tell us who you are. Use star 6 to unmute. Yes, caller 6. We can't hear you.
Yes,
Says you're
Catherine
unmuted.
Adelaide.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Catherine. We'll put your name in, and we'll call you. Are you calling about public comment at the end of the meeting?
No, I'm calling specifically on item 7.
Okay, thank you.
When that's done, whatever.
That's
that
the
good?
next item. That's the next item. We're good. Thank you. I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, caller 7, can you unmute? Star 6 to unmute. Go to your keypad and push star 6, and that will unmute you. All right, commissioners.
So
We're having trouble with that caller, so I guess we'll move on. Do you want to do public comment now?
So there's no other callers right now?
There is, but they're not unmuting.
Oh, okay, okay. So we can thank these people and move on to item 7?
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe Ms. Adelaide is calling in for public comment on that item.
On that item, yeah, okay. Okay, item 7, request for a public hearing on an ordinance change, text amendments to Chapter 158, adult use of cannabis.
You want to do the public comment first?
Say again?
Generally speaking, do you want to do the public comment first? That's the way
Sure.
we're set up.
Do you have cards too, or just a
No,
caller?
just-
Okay, so, Chris, can we go ahead and do the public comment?
Certainly. Ms. Adelaide, if you could click on *6 and you'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Catherine Adelaide, Carroll County Republican Central Committee. I think everybody knows where I stand on this issue. It caught me a little bit off guard because I have been tied up with many other issues. We've got a lot going on the Central Committee. Some new news will be coming out after tonight, but I can't say anything yet. Anyway, I'm concerned about the direction of what I've read. I mean, of course, I'm all for public comment. I rather suspect that possibly during the public comment, a lot of potheads are going to show up in mass, as they did in Annapolis. And actually, that convinced them not to pass it that year. But, you know, decent working, hardworking people who don't use drugs, including pot, will be busy working. So you might get fewer of them, but I'm going to try to, you know, get people in. But I want to remind you that neither the recommendation of your planning commission is binding, nor a bunch of people showing up. While you do represent the people have to be wanting to get something that's actually legal and not illegal. Otherwise, it's a mobocracy, not a democracy. So I really want to remind you that you're the final authority. I don't like the direction I'm seeing your planning department going. The idea of bringing Carroll County into conformance with an illegal state law is absolutely appalling to me. As I mentioned before, all pot is illegal under federal law, Schedule I drug with heroin and ecstasy. Article 6 of the Constitution Supremacy Clause says the U.S. Constitution and congressional statutes are the supreme law of the land, and any state law that directly violates a federal law is null and void, like adult use cannabis. The Supreme Court specifically ruled on a direct conflict between a state law and a constitutional law regarding pot. The federal law would supersede the state law. So you have everything you need. And quite frankly, as Republicans, this is a place where government should really step out of this. You have every right and authority to tell your planning commission and the people of Carroll County that you're not going to get involved with this until they follow the proper legal procedure and change the federal schedule. They're in the process of trying to do that, but they haven't done it yet. So that will buy us more time to try to sort this mess out. So I really urge you, planning and zoning should advise the commission to follow the federal law in Carroll County until the schedule has been changed. I did want to thank Commissioner Vigliotti, who voted against the pot factory in Taneytown. I've been fighting medical pot, which was the precursor to recreational pot. That pot factory in Taneytown is situated right next to a ball field. Every event I attend at that park, I have constituents coming up to me saying they don't want their kids there anymore because the smell is grooming their children's, you know, olfactory their noses to get used to the smell of pot. So I don't want to see this in the rest of Carroll County. But I know for sure, you know, former Taneytown Councilman Joe Vigliotti voted against the pot in Taneytown. So I hope you'll follow that good lead. We just can't make zoning for things that are illegal. We don't make zoning things for trafficking children or prostitutes or
Please finish your thoughts.
bars under 21. Okay. So we don't just serve the people as Republicans. You serve the RNC platform, which is against it, as elected officials. You took an oath of office to follow the Constitution. You have the best law you could ever have to stay out of this until the state of Maryland follows the legal procedure and gets a schedule change. Thank you very much. Appreciate your help.
Thank you.
We do have one more caller. See if they can unmute. Caller, if you could unmute your phone for us, we could hear you. Currently, you are muted. Star 6 to unmute. Going once. Okay, commissioners.
Thank you. Your 3 minutes were about up. Please.
Okay, so with that, I'll get started with our presentation a bit longer. So as you can see, we are here to discuss adult use cannabis, incorporating it into the zoning text. So this process started back in April of 2023 with the Maryland legislation being passed permitting adult use cannabis. At this April 2023 meeting with you all, you gave staff and the Planning Commission some direction, and that was to prohibit on-site consumption establishments in the county and to restrict cannabis dispensaries as much as possible. Looking into the Maryland legislation a little more, obviously it permits the selling, growing, and processing of adult use cannabis in the state. In 2023, existing medical dispensaries had to apply to be converted to adult use and a standard medical dispensary. The legislation gives zoning authority to the jurisdictions, and however, the legislation says political subdivisions may not establish zoning or other requirements that unduly burden the cannabis licensee. The legislation also gives counties the authority to prohibit on-site consumption establishments. Those establishments are defined as an entity licensed to distribute cannabis or cannabis products for on-site consumption. And this went into effect July 1, 2023. So currently, medical cannabis facilities are only allowed in the commercial and industrial zoning districts in the county. A dispensary for medical cannabis is a permitted use in the C2 and C3 districts. A dispensary of medical cannabis in conjunction with a medical cannabis growing and or processing facility is permitted in the I1 and I2 district. The indoor growing of medical cannabis and indoor processing of medical cannabis is permitted in the I1 and I2 districts. There are no medical dispensaries, processors, or growers currently in the county. All of these cannabis facilities are subject to the additional regulations in this column. So we have Chapter 158.002, which is our definitions, Chapter 158.040, which is distance requirements, and then Chapter 158.059, which is the medical cannabis general regulations. Looking at those additional requirements a little bit more, the distance requirements for cannabis facilities, currently they must be 400 feet from any lot in a residential district and 400 feet from any lot of less than 3 acres in the Ag and Conservation District. The general regulations for medical cannabis in Chapter 158.059 states that outdoor growing of medical cannabis is prohibited in all zoning districts. All lighting shall comply with site plan requirements. Site plans require Planning Commission approval, and no variances from this section or the distance requirements will be granted. So this was brought up with Planning Commission. They discussed it at their July 18th and October 17th meetings. Their recommendations are as follows: replacing the definitions for medical cannabis with definitions for adult use cannabis, increasing the distance requirements from 400 feet to 500 feet, and this is in compliance with the Maryland legislation. Also in compliance with the Maryland legislation, including a distance requirements of a cannabis facility must be 1,000 feet from another cannabis facility. Cannabis products are not permitted to be sold in conjunction with a temporary zoning certificate. And they also recommended changing the land use tables to include adult use cannabis to be regulated the same way as medical cannabis is currently being regulated.
So the proposal now would be that schools would be the same distance as residential?
Yes, that's the recommendation, and I'll get to that, yeah. Mhm. Looking at these recommendations a little closer, changes to the definitions, what you see in red is new language, so new definitions for cannabis products, cannabis dispensary, cannabis grower, and cannabis processor would be added, and these definitions are taken straight from the Maryland legislation. Removing the definitions for medical cannabis dispensary, medical cannabis grower, and medical cannabis processor. adding two definitions, Maryland Cannabis Administration and on-site consumption establishment. Again, those definitions are taken straight from the Maryland legislation. And then looking at the general regulations for cannabis, Chapter 158.059, uses related to the growing, processing, or dispensing of cannabis shall comply with the following requirements. The outdoor growing of cannabis is prohibited in all districts. We are also, there was a recommendation to remove the distance requirements from Chapter 158.040 and place them in this section, Chapter 158.059. So a licensed cannabis dispensary, grower, and/or processor may not locate within 500 feet from a pre-existing primary or secondary school, a licensed child care center, or a registered family care home, may not be within 500 feet of a playground, rec center, library, or public park, 500 feet from any lot in a residential district, and 500
Yeah, but I'm on mute, and I couldn't get in.
and 500 feet from any lot, any residential lot of less than 3 acres.
And what defines that distance? The building, the property line, the facility?
So we have the language added, recommended distance will be taken from the nearest point of the structure occupied by the use, so the building, and then the nearest point of the structure from which the separation is to be established, so the building to the building.
So, a playground, recreation center, et cetera, that would be from the ball field, from the tot lot, from whatever
500,
was
yeah.
actively used?
Correct.
Not the property line, not,
Correct.
yeah, okay.
That's what's recommended.
Gotcha.
Do you want to, if that person's here to,
I don't know, Chris, do you want to?
Yes, we have another caller. She's called back in. If you could take 3 minutes of your time, identify yourself. You are unmuted and ready to go.
Anything for you, Chris.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
hello.
we can hear you.
Okay, good. This is Robin Frazier, former commissioner and also chair of Planning Commission at one point in time. And I am calling to say that I think this is premature and that it's pretty simple, that we don't have zoning for things that are illegal. And marijuana is a Schedule I drug, is still federally illegal. And I would suggest that you simply put into the code that growing and processing and dispensing are illegal until the federal government makes marijuana legal. And the reason this is important is, well, there's two things. First of all, the federal government, the federal law supersedes the Maryland law. And secondly, the reason it's a Schedule I drug, which wasn't explained well on the ballot, this is the one they made really wishy-washy, was that drugs that on Schedule I are drugs that are considered unsafe even under medical supervision. And so they have no use in health care and are used only for their addictive effects. That's what a Schedule I drug is. It's right in the same category of ecstasy, heroin, and LSD. So we don't have to have zoning for things that are illegal. We don't have zones for sex trafficking. We don't have zones for prostitution. We don't have zones for bars for people that are under 18, because those are all illegal activities. And so I would encourage you to just claim that this is an illegal activity according to federal law, and so therefore we're not going to allow it in any of our zones until the federal government changes the law. So I wanted to give you that input and that thought so that we can not move forward with something that would be damaging to the health of our people. Thank you for letting me speak, and I appreciate having a second chance to get in there.
Yes, thank you.
All right, take care.
Chris, anyone else?
That's all we have, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. So continuing on, Some added language again to section 158.059, adding the language that cannabis products are not permitted to be sold in conjunction with a temporary zoning certificate. And that goes right into our temporary and seasonal uses zoning chapter. Adding language to say that seasonal sales of items does not include cannabis products. And then lastly, we are at our use tables. As we said before, it is recommended that we amend our use tables to regulate adult use cannabis the same way we are currently regulating medical cannabis. So dispensaries are permitted in the C2 and C3 districts. When dispensaries are in conjunction with a growing or processing facility, they are permitted in the I1 and I2 district. On-site consumption is prohibited in every zoning district. Indoor growing is permitted in the I1 and I2, and indoor processing is permitted only in the I1 and I2. Starting with our agriculture and conservation use table, amending the use of growing of medical cannabis to say growing of cannabis. This is prohibited in both the ag and conservation zoning districts. Removing chapter 158.040, because as we said, the recommendation is to remove the distance requirements from chapter 158.040 and place them in chapter 158.059. Moving on to the residential districts, adding a use for facility for dispensing of cannabis, which is prohibited in all the residential districts. Deleting the use for facility for dispensing of medical cannabis. Amending the use of indoor growing of medical cannabis to say indoor growing of cannabis, which will be prohibited in all the residential districts. And then here we have our commercial, industrial, and employment campus use tables. Removing the uses for facility for dispensing of medical cannabis and removing facility for dispensing of medical cannabis in conjunction with a medical cannabis growing and/or processing facility. Adding a use for cannabis dispensary to be permitted in the C2 and C3 district. Cannabis dispensary in conjunction with a cannabis growing and/or processing facility to be permitted in the I1 and I2 district. And then adding use for the on-site consumption establishments to be prohibited in all zoning districts. And then amending the uses for indoor processing of medical cannabis to say indoor processing of cannabis to be permitted in the I1 and I2. Amending the indoor growing of medical cannabis use to say indoor growing of cannabis to be permitted in the I1 and I2. And then looking at the additional regulations column, chapter 158.002 is our definitions. Chapter 158.048.01 is the temporary and seasonal uses chapter. And then chapter 158.059 is the general regulations for cannabis. So lastly, we are here today to request approval to schedule a public hearing for this zoning text amendment. Following a approval, the public hearing would be advertised for 2 consecutive weeks. The county commissioners would hold the public hearing, and then a vote on the text amendment would follow.
Well, thank you very much for putting all that together. I know it's a lot of information, and I certainly do appreciate you taking into account our desire to be as restrictive as is humanly possible with this, because I know we're all on the same page up here that this is a dangerous substance at the end of the day that we're having to contend with. So if nobody else has any thoughts on this, I'll make a motion.
Actually,
I apologize.
I'm sorry.
No, please, go
If you don't mind, I just want to
Yeah,
jump
please.
in here real quick. Proposed change under section 158.059, under A, where it shows 500 feet from pre-existing primary or secondary school in the state, licensed child care center or registered family child care home under Title 9.5 of Education article. We then go on to talk about playgrounds, recreation centers, libraries, etc. The one thing I'm going to mention this morning, and had to kind of see it in red for it to jump out at me, dependent upon how we approach this, we're kind of leaving some things open here. And I don't know where exactly we want to go, but for example, and I'll just make it real easy, we're talking about this organization this morning. Boys and Girls Club is neither a child care center nor a family child care facility. So then the question becomes, at least my thought is, would that leave them open? Now granted, there's a library across the street from that location, but if we jump over to North Carroll area, and they have a location there, does that then allow them or any other organization like them, not just solely them? Does that then allow that as a possible opening for a facility to be near them? That would be one of my,
Do you consider a rec center?
I need to look a little deeper into that. I mean, that is the question.
'Cause, I mean,
Well,
we
and
wa-
I'm glad you
yeah.
brought up Pantherplex.
Yeah.
They have 2 home school groups in there.
Yes.
Right.
The home school groups
Would-
say they're not a school, they're a business. And that changes some of the regulations that apply to them.
Yes.
The community college is looking at going in on the floor below. How are they affected in this? Are they a school? Is Western Maryland a school? You know, it's
What
I
about
don't
even,
know how specific we get, but it's a
I
good
don't know
point.
either, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
mention that point this morning while I was looking at it.
and Commissioner Gordon, that's a very good point, and it made me think about, we have a number of churches that have Sunday schools. So does that fall under an education center? Does that fall under a house of worship? Does that fall under a recreation center? That I'm not sure about. And then also, I mean, I don't know whether or not this pertains to what Commissioner Gordon is referencing as well. Where would a rehab facility fall under, a rehab house or something? Does that fall under anything that's been outlined in here? Because, I mean, you obviously you don't want a dispensary opening up across the street from a rehab or a rehab home.
Unless it's in a residential district or on a lot that's less than 3 acres in the agri-conservation districts.
So that the rehab homes would not, they are taken into consideration through what you'd mentioned.
If they're in a residential district.
Okay.
But to your point, Commissioner Vigliotti, and I'm not trying to split hairs this morning, but you do have the possibility, and I'm not taking anything away from residential treatment, but you can have potentially residential treatment in a commercially zoned property that would be directly next to residential, which then begs the question, does that kind of get around this piece of language here?
So then, I'm sorry.
No, I agree. And, you know, we want to think through this. So there are those loopholes that are out there and very concerning. You know, the churches have a lot of school facilities in them, you know. Some are just on Sundays, but others are childcare throughout the week and then on Sundays. So are they addressed?
I was saying they might fall under the licensed childcare center if they
I
did
see.
apply to get a license.
You could probably add houses of worship if you were
Yeah.
to the list.
I think just thinking
Just
through
to
this.
address that.
Yeah, just think, you know, it's a good point. There has been
Boys and girls.
ordinances that have been put in place in the past where we had not identified the loopholes or potential loopholes and had been taken advantage of. So the more clear we are in this, the better off we are starting this off. So I appreciate Commissioner Gordon bringing that up, but yeah, I just to think through this, you know, so we
And I think,
minimize those.
yeah, I think we want to say, we want to look at whatever restrictions we need to do. And I think we'll also, if we do a public hearing, which I think we're going to hear a motion to do, we got to encourage people to come tell us
Yes.
that what they think restrictions ought to be.
And this may be a Commissioner Kyler dumb question. I
Thank
don't
you.
know. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Did you just call him dumb?
No. I'm classifying what I'm asking akin to what he would ask, maybe. I don't know. But so under the temporary and seasonal uses, I mean, I know that we have farmers markets, and I know that some of them sell plants and things, and I see that those are accounted for under here. But would marijuana fall under a kind of produce that wouldn't be covered under plants or flowers or something of that matter? Do we need to?
That's why we added this language into here to say that cannabis products cannot be permitted to be sold in conjunction with like a farmer's market or the temporary, the zoning administrator's approval of it.
Like a festival or
Yeah.
there's different types.
So would, I apologize, so then would farmer's market, you know, specifically fall under What did you say it
Yes,
was?
Seasonal.
Seasonal?
Yeah.
Yes.
They would fall under there, and they have to get approval from the zoning administrator. So if the zoning administrator would see that they would be selling a cannabis product, they would not approve it because it would be outlined in the code.
No, I wanted to make sure, because, I mean, again, that was one of those loopholes or I thought maybe it might be a loophole, as Commissioner Rothstein had alluded to, so thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I happen to agree with the callers, the two callers. And the point about the Schedule 1, I want to make sure people understand that. It's considered a Schedule 1 drug. That's heroin's a Schedule 1 drug. The current administration, the Biden administration, is looking at moving it to a Schedule 3, which is Tylenol with codeine. And anybody who follows the science knows that marijuana is much more dangerous than Tylenol with codeine. In fact, it is extremely dangerous. I think we need to, I would advocate taking a step back and reviewing these changes more before going to a public hearing. Case in point, I mean, the smell of marijuana can travel like a mile. Okay, do you really want it 500 feet from a school? I don't think you do. And let's not forget that anybody who wants to purchase recreational marijuana is not going to have a hard time finding it in Carroll County. They're not going to have a hard time finding it. They can go to any municipality or go into Baltimore County or Howard County or Montgomery County or Frederick County. So I just think I'm going to advocate taking a step back and reviewing these a little more. Did a great job on them. It seems like you've tried to cover like every single base you could possibly cover. This is a very difficult issue. I think the board's going to find out that it's even more difficult than we realize when people start chiming in. But I would advocate just taking a step back and maybe spending a little bit more time reviewing some of the things like you mentioned, Commissioner Gordon, that we're including everything that needs to be included, and that we're being as restrictive as possible if we want to move forward.
And I understand where you're coming from, but I guess my question would be, do we want to do the public hearing? Do we want to hear more from the public while we're doing that, or you think slow that down too?
Again, it's up to I guess we can vote on that.
Yeah.
It just seems like there's a lot in here. I mean, we go over ordinance changes a lot, but this clearly is the most I've ever seen. There's a lot of red ink on there. And again, that's not a criticism. So
what is the timeline? My only concern is, what is the timeline with the state? What are we at risk for if we push this off 6 months? I don't want us to get behind the 8 ball either, because I think we need, whether we like the law or don't like the law, we need to be as restrictive as we can, and if timing's important, that's critical. If it's not,
Yeah, so that's our primary concern, is timing. In that currently, the way our county code reads is that if a adult use distributor, a dispenser, wanted to obtain a license here in Carroll County, we do not have any codes in place related to that. So the bucket, as it were, or the use category we would have to consider them would be general retail, which would have none of these restrictions. So that's where we're advocating for getting these basic guidelines in as restrictive as possible, and then continuing to have the discussion as far as any additional restrictions, or as the state would allow, or if the state has additional changes, we can always reopen this and change the code additionally. But from a staff perspective, we feel that it's important to get the basic guidelines in so that we have that use bucket of adult use cannabis in our zoning code, so we know how to treat it, and your desire on, at least initially, how to treat it if an application were to come in.
Okay, and I know we'd have to advertise and there's time frames, but just for discussion, let's say we had the public hearing next Thursday, and 2 weeks after that we voted on it, and we're trying to be as restrictive as we can be. What's the time frame to reopen it and look at stuff? How is that going to take 6 months, or where are we at? Because we need to do we need to restrict any way we can, I think, before we're behind the 8 ball. But I don't like you say, this is complicated, this is a lot of stuff. I don't want to tie our hands that we can't get more restrictive a month later if we want to, but we can't do it that quickly.
If it's a zoning code change that you would look to do, then our code process is that you refer it to Planning Commission discusses it, makes a recommendation back to you, and so on. So yes, there is a process that would take some time. What I would submit is that we have some time now. As you mentioned, the public hearing would be in 2 weeks, thereabouts, and then further discussion. We can put in however restrictive you wish. So adding things like schools and so on to distance requirements, we can absolutely put those in. I think the importance is getting something on the books.
Legally, let's say we do the public hearing in 2 weeks. Can they still be tweaking it? How much can they change after the public hearing before we vote on it, and we're still safe not to have a public hearing again?
Well, I think that the notice of public hearing is making very clear that you're considering adopting regulations about the location of facilities for recreational cannabis. So I think you can do a lot of tweaking.
But not specific wording, we're just the regulation.
Yeah, you're not completely considering a topic completely different from recreational cannabis.
Okay,
You're
okay.
just considering different verbiage than the public may have been alerted to in the advertisement. But the advertisement clearly saying you're considering regulations to recreational cannabis. Also, one caution, keep an eye on Annapolis. There was a bill dropped yesterday that is sort of a punch directed directly at local governments with regard to this topic, as far as us being able to regulate the locations.
And it doesn't matter if we beat them to the punch or not,
Now, it won't matter. I
if
mean,
they go through.
The state law would control.
If they preempt, they preempt.
Right.
And to Mr. Hines' point, though, you had that first round of licenses for social equity that the date for deadline was December 12th. We're in January. So I understand completely where Commissioner Guerin's coming from, and I agree with him, and I agree with Commissioner Kyler as well on both sides of this. I think the challenge is we've got to do something relatively soon. Carroll County, if I'm not mistaken, I think my notes are correct, we're looking at, I believe it's 2 additional in the first round. For comparison, Frederick's looking at 3 and Baltimore County's looking at 6. So we've got the 2 currently in Westminster city limits, and this would be a 2 additional, if I'm not mistaken.
Two in Westminster?
Yes, there's 2 here in Westminster. You've got the one up
The two you're
towards.
talking about are.
No, these are 2 additional.
They
These
could
are
go
the-
anywhere in
These
the
are 2
county.
that could
Okay,
go
okay. I
currently
just wanna
anywhere.
clarify.
So these could be anywhere
I just want to
within.
clarify that's what he
No,
meant.
these could be anywhere within the county, and I think we would much rather not have it just fall into general retail.
Most definitely.
My personal feelings on this would be, I think we should move ahead to the public hearing. Mr. Burke has stated that it can be pretty broad in the description of that, and that it would give us at least ample time to continue some conversations, plus listen to the public and kind of formulate maybe a slightly more defined definition.
And the motion as recommended covers that.
I think so. I believe so.
Yeah, go ahead. Public.
And just to add a little bit of the discussion here, everybody knows I served on the city council in Tawnytown, and about 9 years ago, we looked at this back when it was just medical growers, and then and then the dispensaries came later, and so we did an overlay zone, very similar to this, 500 feet from schools, 500 feet from parks, 500 feet from residential areas. And, nobody on the city council, the mayor, no one wanted, nobody wants it to be legalized, right? But dealing with the circumstances the way that they are, it's better that we have something from which to work and from which to try to regulate things or restrict things as we can, and then use that as a launching ground beyond that. And so I think it's important that we have something in place at minimum from which to work. Because as it stands, I mean, they're already here. And if we don't try to regulate them as this continues to come in, if it falls under general commercial, then that's tremendously problematic. And so the areas that we are able to restrict and control as we can right now, I do want to see us move ahead with something like that, because it does give us that authority to be able to restrict and control what we can. Now, I am all for arguing with the state about, whether or not it should be legal. Of course, everybody knows I think it should be illegal. I am all for, the science behind it, that it is a dangerous substance, and I'm not disputing any of that. But giving us and our administration the ability to be able to contend with this as it is, I think, is incredibly important. And
It sounds like you'd like to make a motion, and Commissioner Gordon would like to second it.
I'll make a motion to direct staff to schedule a public hearing for proposed text amendments to Chapter 158 to address the zoning code for adult-use cannabis.
Second.
Any more discussion? Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, open administrative. Do we have any more callers? Do we have any comments from anybody up here during open administration?
No, sir.
I have no one left on the calls.
What did he say?
No one, no
None.
calls.
Okay, I couldn't tell if he said none or two. So are we ready to do the agenda?
Wanda's always ready.
And I've got to mention, as you're coming up here, last Friday was a snow day. And I wonder, like the public commenter said about us, who cares? I got some stuff that it wasn't up. And, where's our agenda? And I said it snowed, it wasn't a work day, and we need to see it. So it's nice that you're under the microscope.
How are you, Wanda?
Thank you.
Okay, ready? Monday, and Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday, Mako in Annapolis, Collard and Rothstein, Mako in Annapolis, Collard and Rothstein, Board of Education, operating budget hearing. And right now, we have no one attending that.
I may attend.
You will?
Yeah, we need to get back. You
I
said.
need to be back
Yeah.
for wrestling.
So if we drive together, get back, I can still be around, because I'll be up here.
So you'll attend that, good,
attend
thank
that.
you. Thursday, 8 AM, close admin, 9 AM, open meeting. Item 1, legislative update. Item 2, public comment on and discussion on purchasing 2 ambulances. And then maybe Chris will have public comment in general. Friday, Saturday, nothing. Sunday, the podcast is Commissioner Vigliotti. There's an Eagle Scout Court of Honor in Eldersburg, Commissioner Rothstein. There's an Eagle Scout Court of Honor in Mount Airy, Commissioner Guerin. And I'm hoping I'm going to soon have one in Manchester, Hampstead. It's neat to follow the Eagle Scouts. Anything changed that week? Next week, Monday, nothing. Tuesday, 6:30 PM, the Maryland's Office of Overdose Response, Commissioners Kyler and Rothstein. On Wednesday, Mako, Kyler and Rothstein, Goose Ridge Soaps, ribbon cutting in Hampstead, Commissioner Kyler. And Thursday, closed admin and open meeting. Item 1, legislative update. Item 2, consolidated transportation program. And item 3, budget quarterly update. And both of those can have public comment and general public comment. And oh my gosh, the podcast is Commissioner Kyler.
What will Commissioner Kyler say, Commissioner Kyler?
You'd have it written already. I'm not ready yet. Any other changes to the agenda? Now, are we doing an administrative meeting? Do I need a motion to,
This is closed for security.
well, yeah, but first, do I need a motion to just go in recess till 1:30?
Well, so you'd close for the public safety or security.
So we need
meeting,
close for that.
And then you close.
Okay, so first, I need a motion to go into close for public safety.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Now I need a motion to go into recess until 1, leave it 1?
Well, you have outsiders coming, so 1-ish.
Yeah, okay.
No earlier.
You want to say 1:30 now and let everybody know.
If we can, we'll try to get in touch with them, sure.
What do you-
Okay.
If it's possible, or
Yeah.
1:15, any amount of time will be helpful.
Okay. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.